As Matt just mentioned, we have a breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City. It happened just a few moments ago, apparently. We have very little information available at this point in time, but on the phone we do have Jennifer Oberstein, who apparently witnessed this event. Jennifer, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, can you please tell me what you saw and give me any information about what's going on there?
Yes, I have to tell you, it's quite terrifying. I'm in shock right now. I came out of the subway at Bowling Green. I was heading to work in Battery Park at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and I come out, and I heard a boom, looked up, and there was a big ball of fire. I'm now looking north at the World Trade Center, and it is the left twin tower if I'm looking north. I'm in Battery Park right now, and you can hear the fire engines and the emergency crews behind me, and it is unbelievable. When the fire first burst, it was a... Hello?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
In air like I've never seen before, and as you know, I used to work in news. I've never seen any fire like this in the air, and the pieces of the building were flying down. It looks like it's like the top, I can't even tell you, maybe 20 floors. Intense smoke. It's horrible. I can't even describe it to you.
Do you have any idea what kind of plane it was?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any idea what hit the World Trade Center?
What it was?
Yeah, what kind of plane? We're getting reports that an airplane hit the building.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Honestly, I was walking up, and it looked up and saw a big boom and fire. You know, I got to tell you, we were all saying around here that it was very interesting that it would be a bomb and it would be so high up. So perhaps it was a plane. We have no talk of a plane. However, I have to tell you, there are still things flying in the air. I mean, it's mind-boggling, and it's horrifying.
Jennifer, it's Matt Lauer. I'd like to ask you, while you were close to the building, or have you, since the explosion, seen anyone who's been injured being taken out of the building? Are there ambulances dealing with people on the sidewalk around the building?
No, I have not. I have not gotten that close. I have to tell you that my father works in the World Financial Center, and I first called over there to see, because it's next door, to see, you know, if he was okay. I couldn't get through, and I'm far away right now. I thought it might be a little dangerous to get too close. I saw lots of debris coming down, and right now I'm in Battery Park. I don't know, you know, it's probably a 5-minute walk from here to the World Trade Center, but the smoke is incredible. I mean, I can't see the top of the tower. It's starting to cover the top of the second tower.
In fact, we're looking at pictures right now, Jennifer, with a huge gaping hole on the side of the building and billowing smoke. So
I'm right now, you see, yeah, I see major fire. I definitely see fire.
And Jennifer, you said you're looking north at the building, so in other words, you're south of the building,
Yes,
is that right?
Correct.
Because we're looking at a picture that is looking at the north side of the building.
I'm on the exact opposite side.
And it appears that is where the largest hole is, and again, as you mentioned correctly, toward the top of the building, but on the north side, and then on the, what I think is the west side of the building, we can also see some holes there that could have been from damage once the impact occurred. Again, we've been told that this is a plane. We don't have confirmation on that, but there is an enormous hole in the north side of that building.
Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit more about what you heard when you heard this explosion? Describe it for us.
Absolutely. When I walked out of the subway, I looked at the Twin Towers because, I mean, I just always look up there. And right when I looked up, there was a boom. It wasn't that loud. Like, it wasn't huge. However, what was unbelievable was the amount of fire. It was a big ball of fire that just went up. And I looked around at people. We were all horrified. I'm stuttering because I'm in such shock. I've never seen anything like it. It's just horrible.
And of course, this is real cause for concern because the World Trade Center is one of the busiest office buildings here in New York, with hundreds, perhaps thousands of workers who...
New York State Governor has his office,
Oh,
New York
right.
City office there.
Several thousand
and of
workers.
course, given the time that this has happened, it's only probably appropriate to surmise that people might have been in the building.
And you know, we've seen stories in the past where planes have hit buildings, small planes, and it would be hard to imagine that a small plane could create that kind of hole in a building like the World Trade Center and create the damage on the other side of the building from the sheer impact. Small small planes tend to crumple and then fall down the building. Again, we haven't talked to anyone who's close to the base of the building, so we don't know what kind of debris or wreckage. Yes, go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm sorry. I'm just talking to a police officer right here, and he says, yes, he heard it was a plane.
Does he have any information about what kind of plane it was, or can he tell us any more details?
May I? I'm going to put you on hold for one moment, okay?
Just to recap, if you're just joining us, you're looking at dramatic pictures of New York's World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where a short time ago we are told that a plane crashed into the upper floors of the westernmost tower. You can see a gaping hole. That is on the north side of the building, and you can see residual damage on the west side of that building, and obviously fires are burning right now in the World Trade Center.
Tall buildings have had a real problem here in New York. There was, back in the 40s, a plane hit the Empire State Building. In the 60s, a helicopter crashed on the top of what was the Pan Am Building, now the MetLife Building. So
right now we're getting information, Al, that it was a small commuter plane, and of course we'll let people know as soon as we have more information as to what actually caused this, and of course on everybody's mind who might have been hurt as a result of this terrible, terrible incident. We're going to be talking to more eyewitnesses coming up in just a few minutes.
We're back at 9 o'clock Eastern Time on this Tuesday morning, and we're back with dramatic pictures of an accident that has happened just a short time ago. You're looking at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where just a few minutes ago we're told that a plane, some reports are that it was a small commuter plane, crashed into the upper floors of one of the twin towers. You can see fire and flames or smoke billowing from that tower. There is a gaping hole on the north side of the building. That's the side you're seeing to the left-hand side of your screen right now, and other damage to the west side of that building, which is to the right side of your screen. This, of course, happened just before the morning commute, before people were heading into their offices, and while I'm sure some people were already at work, immediately there's speculation or cause for concern. This is the World Trade Center that was the center of a terrorist bombing some years ago. So the questions have to be asked, was this purely an accident, or could this have been an intentional act? But either way, extensive damage has been done to this building.
it also looks like there's smoke coming out of the east side of the building. In that shot we just saw, looks like white smoke billowing out the side of the east side of the building.
Obviously, horrified commuters were absolutely devastated when they heard this explosion. We talked with somebody a moment ago about that, Jennifer Oberstein, and also another eyewitness, Elliot Walker, who is actually a producer here on the Today Show. Elliot, can you hear me?
Yes, hi Katie.
Hi, Elliot. Tell me where you are and what you saw.
Well, I live in this area. I've returned to my apartment, but I was walking down the sidewalk delivering my young daughter to school, and we heard a very loud sound, the kind of sound you hear when a plane is you know, going fast past you, followed by an enormous crash and an immediate explosion. I don't think we could feel shock waves, but we sort of felt like we did. And we were in a position where we could see the Trade Center almost immediately between the other buildings. And an enormous fireball that must have been 300 feet across was visible immediately. A secondary explosion, I think, and then plumes of smoke. There must have been a 3-block cloud of white smoke. Now, from where I was on the street a moment ago, you can in fact see smoke leaving the building on 3 sides. It seems to be coming out on at least 4 or 5 floors. The air is filled with hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper that are just sort of floating like confetti. The area is swarmed with emergency vehicles and sirens. Obviously, we're very sensitive to this kind of thing in this neighborhood.
Elliot, have you, of course, because of the incident that occurred in the early 1990s, have you seen any evidence, Elliot, of people being taken out of the building? You say that emergency vehicles are there, understandably so, but of course the major concern is human loss. I mean, do you know if there were many people in the building?
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision. Can you see it? I can see it on the shot.
Oh my!
Something else has
just. You know what? We just saw a plane circling the building.
It is in the other building.
We just saw a plane circling the building a second ago on the shot right before that.
I think there may have been another impact. Can you tell? I just heard another very loud bang and a very large plane that might have been DC-9 or a 747 just flew past my window, and I think it may have hit the Trade Center again.
To be honest, Elliot, I didn't get the impression that it was that big a plane.
It looks big from here.
I did see a plane go by a second ago, though, and it has now impacted the building. I'm trying to see if it's the different tower.
I think it may have been. I believe the
tower.
first one was World Trade Center 1, and it looks, from what I'm seeing on the television, like it may have been
We're
the second
see,
building that
this
was
is
hit.
a piece of tape, and we may actually see another plane enter the picture here in a second.
I wonder if there are air traffic control problems.
Let's go back to Jennifer Oberstein, who was talking to a second ago. Jennifer, did you see this happen?
Hello?
Did you just see this happen, Jennifer?
Matt, I've never seen any. It looks like a movie. I saw a large plane, like a jet, go immediately headed directly into the World Trade Center. It just flew into it, into the other tower, coming from south to north. I watched the plane fly into the World Trade Center. It was a jet. It was a very large plane. It was going fast. It went past the Ritz-Carlton Hotel that's being built in Battery Park. It flew right past it, almost hit it, and then went in.
This is so shocking, of course, to everybody watching.
I've never seen anything like it. It literally flew itself into World Trade Center.
Obviously now we move from what appears to have, there it is right there.
Again, I'm looking from south to north, and it went into the one on the right.
That appeared to be at least a 727. We saw it a second ago. Here comes the videotape that we just showed you. You will see what appears to be a large plane. It could be a 727 right there, maybe even bigger, flying right into the side of the World Trade Center.
It was at least a 727. It was a jet. I couldn't believe my eyes watching it right above me.
And now you have to move from talk about a possible accident to talk about something deliberate that has happened here. We're going to immediately check with air traffic control in the area to find out if they had contact with either of these planes before the accident, but what we've just seen is about the most shocking videotape I've ever seen.
What are the odds of two separate planes hitting both towers?
Elliot, are you still there?
Hello?
Elliot?
Yes, I'm still here, Katie.
So, Elliot, what can you see right now from your perspective?
I don't face in that direction. I can't see anything personally.
It is completely impossible to understand why this is happening and to figure out what in the world is going on.
I think we have to be grateful
Ali
that the first
Eberhard
plane hit before 9 a.m., but it's now after 9 a.m., and I just wonder how many people were
A
in
lot of
those
those
offices.
buildings fill up.
Well, hopefully that they were evacuated following the first incident, and we can only hope that there was a very short period of time from when we first learned about this was probably about 8:50 Eastern Time. This second incident occurred about 9:05, and so obviously that would be a short amount of time to get people out of the building. Ali Eberhard is another witness who is on the ground. Ali, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Please tell me what you're seeing.
Well, I live in Lower Manhattan. I face the north tower, the north side where the first plane crashed into the building, and right now there's a lot of chaos on the ground, a lot of emergency vehicles. Everyone from the World Financial Center has exited and is walking north up to Battery Park North. There's just mass and mass of people walking north uptown of Manhattan. I happened to look on the first tower, and I actually saw people waving where the first plane crashed through, and then it was unbelievable seeing this second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
And unfortunately, here in New York, many of our stations cannot see this, local stations, because the antennas are on the World Trade Center. They're backup towers on the Empire State Building, but communication, television communication in New York City is probably pretty much knocked off the air.
I just want to say something. We're looking at a picture here where it appears, because of the angle, I think, that the towers are leaning, and I don't think that is actually the case, because after the first impact, it looked as if it was the right-hand tower was leaning, and now somebody is saying, we're getting a witness saying they are leaning actually right now, which will give you an idea of the type of impact we're talking about.
And that perhaps they're buckling under the force of the collision or the hole that's resulted from these two planes.
We're going to go to George Shea right now, who has also witnessed both or one of these collisions. George, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
What did you see, George?
Yeah, well, I was in a car driving up, just gotten out of the Battery Tunnel, driving north on West Street when an enormous explosion happened. And it was larger than a construction explosion. I looked out the window, and what appeared to be an enormous tire smashed into the ground, and I believe it hit the car to the right of me, and it was just so scary, and there was also a ton of debris fall. And I jumped out of the car and I ran south away from the building because I thought there would be further explosions.
And have you seen anyone injured on the ground, George?
A man next to me was actually hit by a piece of debris in his arm, and they said that someone had been badly hurt in a car ahead of me. I'm not certain if it was the car next to me, and I can't verify that. All I can say is that a lot of debris was falling. It was very confusing because everybody, I think, immediately assumed that a bomb had exploded, and that sort of had people thinking that further bombs may explode. So there was sort of a rush away.
Did you see, George, the second plane, that jet, fly into the other Twin Tower?
I heard two explosions, however. There was a first explosion that was louder, and then a second explosion, and but I could not see that, and I looked up, and when I looked up, I saw debris falling, and the tire, as I said, a very large tire.
Well, of course, this is, as we've said, completely shocking video and a shocking turn of events, and we've been talking here that the first incident, one might surmise that it was some kind of accident, and then to have a second, what appeared to be 727 jet, of course, the question of terrorist activity has to surface, and the question of whether this was an intentional terrorist act of some kind.
You know, keep in mind that we're in an area here where there are three major airports. You have Newark Airport, Kennedy Airport, and LaGuardia Airport, all within several miles of the World Trade Center. You know, it's very unusual for a plane to get into this area without being completely tracked or identified by air traffic control. So you would have to imagine that, A, if this plane were headed right for the World Trade Center, there must have been someone trying to talk or communicate with that pilot, and for it to fly right into the side of the building.
Well, the smaller plane you can understand almost, but a jumbo jet, a large jet, completely.
Let's re-rack that video, if we could, down in the control room where we actually saw the jet flying into the building,
and
which
I was mistaken
unbelievable.
when Elliot Walker said it was a big plane. I was looking in the distance and saw a small plane, which might have been a helicopter actually. To see this plane come into the picture,
there it is.
That is a big plane. And I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's a 737, we're now being told, and flying directly into the midsection of the what would be the eastern tower of the World Trade Center.
I'm wondering if Jennifer Oberstein is still on the phone. Do we still have Jennifer on the phone? She's actually not on the phone because she was near a police officer. At least we could have perhaps gotten more information from that officer. Needless to say, it's pandemonium, I am sure, down there, and we gathered that from even the eyewitnesses with whom we spoke, and how terrifying this was for them to see. And you can only imagine, as you get closer to the Twin Towers, a New York landmark, what the scene must be like there.
You know, you talked about the buildings looking like they're buckled. They're designed to have a 2-degree sway in either direction because of the height of the building and to be able to deal with wind and stress, but something like that is more than it's probably designed for.
We want to go now out to Jane Daranowski, who I understand is a television producer here in New York. Jane, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm down here near the World Trade Center. I was walking down 6th Avenue this morning at 8:42 a.m. A group of us saw a plane veer through the buildings. Then we saw a huge cloud of smoke, and then fire came out of one of the towers. Here, it's near the upper floor, as you can probably see with your chopper shots. And then about 10 minutes ago, a second explosion in the second tower. Lower down, that was not affected by the plane, so I'm not quite sure what happened there. But right now there's a huge gaping hole in one of the towers, and the other building is on fire. The scene down here is incredible. People are out of their office buildings, watching, crying, taking pictures. I've never seen anything like it down here.
Jane, you said you saw the first plane. Did you get a glimpse of what kind of plane that was? We were told it was a small commuter plane.
Well, it wasn't a Cessna or anything like that. It was a larger plane, a mid-sized plane, and we could hear it very low. And walking down the street, a couple of us looked at each other, thinking, what's happening? Then it veered drastically on its side through the buildings and then went into the upper floors of the World Trade Center tower.
And we want to just mention that when the impact hit the first tower, you would hope that people who were in the second tower were beginning to evacuate, especially if air traffic control had some indication that this was deliberate. You'd hope that they were starting to get people out of the other tower before this second plane hit that tower.
But I mean, if you tried to go up, you know, we've been upstairs in the towers of the, you know, in the restaurant up there to try to get down.
I mean, the elevators would have been jammed, no question, but if there was an indication that this was deliberate in the first case, you'd hope that they would immediately begin evacuation in the second tower.
We've got another eyewitness that we'd like to speak with. Dan Dietrich is on the phone. Dan, tell me where you are and what you're seeing or what you saw.
Okay, what I saw was one plane coming in low from the north down over 7th Avenue. It crashed into the top or the middle of one of the towers. 10 minutes later, I saw another plane crash into the other side of the tower at a lower level. It looked to me a small, you know, commercial plane, the first plane that I saw. It crashed into the top of the tower, and there was a huge fireball, and there was a gaping hole in the side of the tower. As we were waiting outside and looking at it, another plane came in low, I believe from the other side, and hit the sort of the middle of the other tower. Now, I saw both planes, two separate planes, crash into each tower.
And Dan, and again, the size of the planes, tell me about that.
I would say that the plane was a mid-size, looked to be a commercial airline. I don't know. I thought perhaps, you know, a commercial airline, a mid-size, not a jumbo jet.
This, of course, is unconfirmed, but we are getting information from an employee of United Airlines. And again, we want to emphasize this is unconfirmed, but there is speculation that an American Airlines plane was hijacked and crashed on purpose into the World Trade Center, and that the second plane was another plane, perhaps hijacked, was then flown in to the second tower. Dan, tell me about people on the ground. Are you at a vantage point where you can see what's happening on the ground?
I'm farther up in the West Village. I'm not on the ground near the base of the towers.
Where were you when it actually happened?
I was walking down 7th Avenue south at about Charles Street, which is about 15 or 20 blocks north of the towers.
Well, obviously, this was a shocking thing for you to witness on this Tuesday morning, you know, where some wires just came out and said in 1945, an Army Air Corps B-25, a twin-engine bomber, crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building. That occurred in dense fog. This was a crystal clear day in Manhattan, so it is completely unclear how there would be any kind of problems with visibility. Dan, thank you so much for talking with us. Hopefully you can stay on the phone and we can check back in with you at another point in time. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We want to also remind people that the World Trade Center bombing that took place on February 26th back in 1993, the product of a terrorist attack, the result of a terrorist attack that killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000. Of course, that happened on a Friday afternoon. I think, Matt, you and Al were working that day.
We were.
I know I was at home in Virginia watching it in disbelief, and now it feels a bit like deja vu. But, of course, this is so much more bizarre.
Yeah, no question. And you keep in mind that killed 6 people, injured 1,000, and the explosion happened in a garage in the basement. This was a direct hit on the midsection or upper section of the tower, so the potential for injuries and death much larger. Of course, also some people on the planes.
Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. If they were hijacked and they were en route to a different destination,
right.
Of course, this story continues to unfold. Bob Kerr joins us now. Bob, where are you and what can you tell us?
Katie, good morning. I'm on the north lawn at the White House, and the first thing we look for here in light of what's happened is whether there is any unusual activity out here, whether there's an unusual police or Secret Service presence, people on the roof, that sort of thing. We don't see that as we speak. I did try to call the National Security Office here. As you know, the president is out of town. He is in Florida. We're told he has been informed of this. I can tell you that the White House National Security staff that remains here is in a senior level meeting, and we're hoping to hear from them as soon as possible. But Katie, the reaction here to the pictures you're seeing and to the initial pictures when they came up, even in what's called the lower press office here at the White House, was one of shock. I mean, people are just standing around television monitors looking at this. And when I say people, I don't mean just the reporters. I mean the people who are actually in the office who work here at the White House.
So very little information is coming out of the White House at this juncture, but needless to say, if the speculation is true about some kind of terrorist event, this will be a major, major crisis for the Bush administration. Jim Miklaszewski is at the Pentagon now. Mick, are you hearing any more information from there?
Well, according to U.S. intelligence officials, Katie, there appeared, at least to their knowledge, to be no specific threat involving hijacking airliners or any attacks on buildings in the New York area. U.S. intelligence officials report this morning that there are, they constantly are hearing about threats, possible terrorist threats against American targets worldwide. But as far as they know this morning, they had no early indications that anything of this nature could have occurred. Pentagon officials are already calling this a terrorist attack. They say that they have not yet ordered the scrambling of any military jets. If National Guard were to be scrambled in that area, that would be at the order of the governor. Now, of course, the president does have the authority to scramble American military forces in defense, but there's a problem here. What now do you defend against exactly? If you put warplanes in the air, there's always a danger that they could misidentify a pilot's intention. Although I believe, according to officials here,
I just wanted to tell you guys,
if you want to continue, are now off limits and restricted. But so far, the U.S. military and Pentagon officials are scrambling to get as much information as they possibly can to determine what course of action, if any, the U.S. military would take.
But, Mick, they are describing this as a terrorist attack right now.
There are some officials here in the Pentagon who are calling this an obvious terrorist attack based on very preliminary information. The information that intelligence officials are getting in terms of a possible hijacked plane, and of course the very horrifying video of the plane veering into the tower itself is a clear indication to everyone here that this is not an accident.
All right, Jim Miklaszewski, thanks. And of course the coordination that took place to have two planes hit the towers within 18 minutes of one another. Let's go back to the White House now. Bob Kerr is still standing by there. Bob, what can you tell us?
Well, Matt, it was interesting to listen to Jim Miklaszewski there from the Pentagon. Of course, the president has the authority to scramble military forces, and this is a case, obviously, in which retaliation, if indeed it proves to be a terrorist incident, will be contemplated. But the usual course of events is it's an investigation. You know, unless someone steps forward, claims responsibility, the White House and other arms of the U.S. government will say, we have to determine who is responsible for this attack, try to pinpoint it, and then the U.S. usually says someone is going to be made to pay. But that is a big if we can determine exactly the origin of this terrorist attack. And so there are some implications to that.
Let's go back to Jim Miklaszewski. Bob, thank you, at the Pentagon. Mick, you have more information?
Well, Katie, Bob's exactly right, but what their primary concern right now is protecting the American public in the New York area right now against any possible further attacks by the air. They have no indications there will be, but there is some concern that since this appeared to be such a highly coordinated attack, that there may be other terrorist attacks that could be planned either in New York or elsewhere. This is absolutely the worst case scenario for the counter-terrorist planners because apparently, according to intelligence officials, there were no firm indications prior to this that anything like this could have happened. But in terms of scrambling the U.S. military, it would be for protection for the time being and not necessarily even thinking right now about any kind of retaliation.
All right, David Gregory is now on the phone from Longboat Key, actually, where
he's following the president.
That's right. David?
Yes, Katie, the president is about to begin an education event, which is obviously being canceled. The event will go forward insofar as the president, we expect momentarily, will come out and make a statement about this. He was made aware en route from his hotel to this school here in Sarasota where he was going to talk about education. He'll make a statement, then we're told by White House officials that he will quickly depart for Washington.
We should mention, David, that New York City Airport or New York area airports have all been closed. The Lincoln Tunnel has been closed here in New York. While we're getting ready to listen to the president, let's go back to Jim Miklashevsky at the Pentagon. Jim, you talk about counter-terrorist measures that are in place. Can you shed any light for us on what kind of things are in place in the event of an attack of this nature?
Well, Katie, it's very difficult for the U.S. military to respond to this kind of thing right now, because it's unclear exactly who's behind it and if there are any other potential attacks or incidents like this, because this has obviously not been officially declared a terrorist attack. But all the experts who are looking at these pictures say there's no doubt about it. This was a coordinated terrorist attack. But who and why is very much unclear right now. And the problem with trying to then put planes in the air to try to prevent any further attacks is these are, after all, open airspaces for the most part. And it's difficult for the U.S. military to simply scramble jets and put them in the air. And then, according to officials here, then do what? This area, of course, according to officials here, is obviously going to be declared off limits in terms of any air traffic. But right now, officials here at the Pentagon are simply scrambling to find out first what happened, right, and what potential reaction the U.S. military could provide in terms of protection. Possible further protection against any further potential attacks.
And Mick, it's important to note that if these planes were hijacked, if they were carrying passengers, there isn't much that military officials could have done. You can't shoot down a plane like that for risk of the people on board, plus for the injuries you could cause on the ground in a place like Manhattan. Go ahead.
That's exactly right. And the president, as we said earlier, does in fact have the authority to scramble the military to put them up in some kind of force protection mode. The governor has the Air National Guard at his disposal. He can do that. But again, officials are pretty much wondering exactly what to do in terms of protection and how. Again, to the terrorist officials, this is absolutely the worst case scenario because there right now seems to be not much they can do in terms of the aftermath.
Mick, obviously, yeah, we're scrambling for information here. I would just want to read this Reuters wire that says 2 planes crashed into the towers of the World Trade Center on Tuesday morning, causing huge explosions and killing at least 6 people. CNBC TV said there were at least 1,000 injured. Both towers of the Lower Manhattan landmark, where thousands of people work, were the scenes of a bombing in 1993. The FBI told the Associated Press that it was, quote, foul play and not an accident. A person who answered the phone, that was reported by ABC, a person who answered the phone on the trading floor at interdealer broker Cantor Fitzgerald, located near the top of the World Trade Center, said, "We're blanking dying," when asked what was happening, and hung up. There was screaming and yelling in the background, and a follow-up call was not answered. Nick Fulton, an eyewitness, said just before the first explosion he saw a plane fly over his apartment in the Soho district of Lower Manhattan. Jamie Gangel is on the telephone, our national correspondent, with more information. Jamie, what can you tell us?
Katie, I've just spoken to top U.S. officials with the access to latest intelligence, and they said, quote, that this was clearly terrorist-related, no question about it. They said that they couldn't give any further details now, not because they didn't want to share it, but because they just don't know yet. They're at the earliest stages.
So do they know, Jamie, if a plane was in fact hijacked?
They would not answer that, and I think that it's because they just are getting the earliest details and they're afraid of putting out misinformation. But they said, you know, that it was clearly terrorist-related.
All right, Jamie, thanks. We're looking again, if you're just joining us, as both towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, where two planes have crashed into the towers, one shortly before 9 o'clock Eastern Time, one shortly after 9 o'clock Eastern Time. And as you can see, the tower on the left was hit just above the midsection point. They're both 110 floors high, 1,300 feet above the ground. The tower on the right was hit more, probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up the tower, but you can see fires burning in both towers. We actually saw a videotape. We watched the second tape, or the second plane hit the building. You'll watch it enter from the right portion of the screen and then make contact with the left-hand tower in what is shocking video. And here it comes right there. And you can see the impact on one side of the building and the residual damage coming out of another side of the building. And one can only imagine that that one occurred shortly after 9 o'clock in the morning. How many people were in the building at the time of the impact? And it's a large plane. We're told it was either a 737. Some reports that the first plane was a 757.
Some kind of Airbus. That was what the United worker told us, that apparently that it was an American Airlines plane that had been hijacked from Boston to Los Angeles, but we're just getting initial reports of that. And again, we must tell you that we're trying to get as much information, but it is trickling in at a very slow pace. So all of this is unconfirmed, and of course speculation of a terrorist attack is unconfirmed, although that is what some Pentagon officials are saying. Let's go to President Bush right now.
Unfortunately, we'll be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
No. That, of course, was President Bush, who is in Florida, in Longboat Key. He was speaking at an elementary school. He had planned to be talking about literacy. Obviously, he had to change. He mentioned that this is an apparent terrorist attack. He is traveling back to Washington. He said that he had spoken to the governor of New York as well as the vice president, that all the resources will be brought to bear by the federal government to determine who did this and who was responsible for this terrible, terrible event. And then, of course, it was followed by a moment of silence for the victims.
We're going to go to Andrea Mitchell now, who has more information on this tragedy. Andrea?
Matt and Katie, I've spoken to a top U.S. official who says that early reports to our intelligence community and to other officials within the administration are that this was a hijacked American Airlines plane en route from Boston to Los Angeles. One of the two planes, they say, was apparently a hijacked American Airlines plane. They caution that early reports still need further confirmation, but this is at least what the U.S. government is being told by American Airlines officials, apparently. They are assuming and have obviously informed the president that this is a terror attack.
And Andrea, we have no information as to in what term of the flight this plane was taken over, how much warning that air traffic controllers may have had that someone hostile was at the controls of this plane?
Exactly right. They had no other information, just that at least one of the two planes was hijacked from Boston en route to Los Angeles, presumably after it had already been in the air and en route, because I was told en route to Los Angeles. So probably hijacked after it had taken off. As you know, those are very short flights. Those are usually 737s or 757s on that route. But this clearly, according to the U.S. government, is a terror attack, as you heard the president say. Now, one of the things, Matt and Katie, we should understand is that there was no specific threat that the U.S. government is aware of. No specific terror alert other than the worldwide caution that had been reissued in recent days because of the strife in the Middle East, because of concerns over terrorists. Of course, the best known is Osama bin Laden, but no alert coming from his organization. And as far as they know, as of this morning, as of this minute, he is in Afghanistan.
But as we should mention, Andrea, it appears that this was a well-coordinated bombing or terrorist act because of the fact that two planes were used, both substantial in size, and the fact that they both hit the World Trade Center within 18 minutes of one another. Obviously, a lot of planning went into this attack. Let's go to NBC's Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon now. Mick, what can you tell us?
Matt, to add to what Andrea Mitchell just said, senior military officials here at the Pentagon are saying they are getting information that the American Airlines Flight 11, after it left Boston apparently, was hijacked and was diverted, apparently the early information was being diverted to JFK for some reason. And then obviously nobody knows exactly who was at the controls of the plane, but it broke off its route from to Los Angeles and was headed toward JFK. That was the initial information that officials had received when obviously it did not go to JFK, but veered off and headed toward the World Trade Center. But again, no indication as to who may be responsible or who was at the controls of that plane when it rammed into the World Trade Center. Matt.
Nick, thank you. We're going to be obviously talking with you throughout the morning, but right now we want to talk with Larry Johnson, a terrorism expert, in fact, the former Deputy Director of the State Department's Office on Counterterrorism. Mr. Johnson, can you please put this into some kind of perspective for us and give us your insight on what might have happened here?
Well, first we need to be cautious before jumping to the conclusion that it's necessarily terrorism. I mean, I would be inclined, based upon the preliminary reports we've seen, to say that that's the case. But there's always the possibility that you may find out after the fact that this was some suicide pact for some reason that had nothing to do with politics. That said, this is a first. Back in 1992, there was 93, there was a Lufthansa plane hijacked from Germany, and it ended up landing in New York. And one of the concerns we had at that time was the possibility of that plane, under the control of a hijacker, flying it into one of the buildings. My concern now is that there's always we ignore terrorism. We talk a lot about it, but we ignore taking very practical steps on security fronts until something like this happens, and then the pendulum swings out to an extreme. The next thing you hear are people talking about putting surface-to-air missiles on top of buildings to prevent this kind of thing. This is a very rare event. It's unlikely to be repeated, but, and I think President Bush put his finger on it, we have to find who did this, and any country, any nation in the world that is in any way involved and responsible, if it turns out to be terrorism, will require a response from the United States, and the United States has got to be willing to pay that price.
Mr. Johnson, obviously we're completely stunned when about 25 minutes after the first explosion, or after the first plane crashed into one of the Twin Towers, another very large plane did the same thing. Right. And we've been talking with our correspondents all morning about sort of if another incident could happen on the heels of these two. What kind of measures are in place to prepare for something else that could conceivably happen?
Well, I think one of the steps that's already being taken, I was at National Airport getting ready to fly to LaGuardia when this occurred. They have shut down air traffic going in and out of the cities. Now, apart from shutting down the air traffic, you're talking about an enormous disruption economically for the nation right now with the air traffic not going in, and people are going to err on the side of caution. I think across the board, you're going to look at the major hubs in the United States where there are large buildings: Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and there are going to be extra measures taken. One possibility is you could start putting up air cover and require that planes stay within a particular area and do not approach any closer. And if they if they approach, you would go to the extremes of having the U.S. Air Force intercept.
Larry, I wanted to ask you, all morning that correspondents have also been saying, particularly Bob Kerr and Jim Miklashevsky, that there was and Andrea Mitchell, no warning attached to this event.
Right.
Generally speaking, do we get some kind of, do U.S. officials, government agencies get some kind of warning from a particular group, or is this pretty, fairly typical in terms of an event happening without any foreshadowing?
No, Katie, this unfortunately is typical. It's only in the movies that you get the advanced warnings. You look at every major terrorist incident against the United States, whether you're talking Pan Am 103, the World Trade Center, the USS Cole bombing, the bombing in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
Rarely do you get an advance notice.
Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Jim Miklashevsky has some new information at the Pentagon. I hope you'll stand by and continue to talk with us. Mick?
Katie, I don't want to alarm anybody right now, but apparently it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon. We're on the E-ring of the Pentagon. We have a window that faces out toward the Potomac, toward the Kennedy Center. We haven't been able to see or hear anything after the initial blast. I just stepped out in the hallway. Security guards were herding people out of the building, and I saw just a moment ago as I looked outside, a number of construction workers who have been working here have taken flight. They're running as far away from the building as they can right now. I hear no sirens going off in the building. I see no smoke, but the building shook for just a couple of seconds. The windows rattled, and security personnel are doing what they can momentarily to clear this part of the building. Again, I have no idea whether it was part of the construction work, whether it was an accident or what is going on. We're going to try to find those details and get them to you as soon as possible. But interestingly enough, one intelligence official here in the building said when he saw what appeared to be the coordinated attack on the World Trade Center, his advice was to stay away from the outside of the building today, just in case. Now again, nobody has any indications of exactly what happened, but it appears that there has been some kind of, it felt like a small blast of some kind. Again, the windows shook, the building shook, the windows rattled, and people, if I'm looking out the window now, and the construction workers are still keeping a good, I'm sorry. The construction workers are still keeping a distance. That's all I can see. And I see no other extracurricular security activity right outside. But to get more information, I'm going to have to break away and walk down the hallway and see what it is exactly that happened here just a few moments ago.
Mick, see what you can find out. Please be careful and let us know what's going on there. Meanwhile, we're going to go back to David Gregory, who is in Longboat Key, Florida, where President Bush was earlier this morning for an event on literacy. He was going to a school to talk with kids. David, what can you tell us?
A little bit more about how all of this unfolded and what the president is going to do next. The president declared this an apparent terrorist act. He offered a prayer for the families, promised to hunt down, in his words, the people responsible for this. He will now travel back to Washington, and aides are telling us now that he will immediately convene a national security meeting to see what steps are taken next.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're looking at live pictures of the Pentagon where there is billowing smoke. Jim Miklashevsky just reported that he heard an explosion, and right now we're looking at an aerial view of the Pentagon. Mick, can you talk to us?
Officially, nobody knows exactly what happened. I think the picture is pretty clear. According to one U.S. Army officer who went running past me at a full trot, he said that it appears that a bomb was detonated at the heliport. The heliport is a helicopter landing area right next to the Pentagon, just adjacent to the E-ring. The offices nearest the heliport area are U.S. Army, Reserve officers, and the Army Reserve offices are located there. But as you can see, it appears to be a pretty significant blast. To give you some perspective, we are almost on the opposite side of the building, the world's largest office building. And as I reported to you, we could feel the building shake and the windows rattle. And as I was in the hallway just a few moments ago, I could smell an acrid kind of smoke, the kind of almost what you'd smell when a fluorescent light goes bad, that kind of ballast smell. And authorities are clearing the building. I don't know if you can hear the sirens outside right now, but it appears that in what I think people here in the building are already describing as a highly sophisticated, coordinated attack, not only against the World Trade Center, but against the Pentagon and U.S. military right here in Washington.
Tell me again, I worked at the Pentagon as well, and it is a huge building. I mean, it's miles and miles of offices. At what location did this seem to have detonated?
It's at the heliport. The heliport, which is as you sit in the Pentagon, you have the Potomac River and Washington, D.C. on one side, and the heliport is located almost exactly on the opposite side of the building, along one of the highways, easily accessible, even though that they've increased security here significantly at the Pentagon within the past couple of years. That area.
I want to mention to you, Mick, that we are hearing, again, unconfirmed reports that this was the result of a plane crashing in the area as well.
I have no idea, Katie. All I know is that people who were in the building who came running from that part of the building thought it was a bomb of some kind. According to Chris Brown, my colleague who just came in, it appears that whatever it was, and perhaps it was a plane, Katie, if those are the initial reports, crashed into, or the damage is on the roof of the building at the heliport side of the Pentagon, which is just opposite of the Potomac River, as I just said.
We're looking at the White House, Mick, because we are learning that there have been some evacuations from the White House. I'm assuming that everyone is being evacuated from the Pentagon?
Well, nobody's given us the official word yet, but I think that's probably a safe bet. Thank goodness that was a helicopter that just flew by. I'm just a little nervous right now when you hear aircraft go past. But they have, in fact, evacuated that portion of the building. Usually they have sirens that go off in the building alerting you to the fact that it's time to get out. I haven't heard those yet, but just judging by the pictures, it's clear that that part of the building that is not damaged, at least, has been evacuated. Like I said, in the hallway, it was pandemonium. People were rushing from their offices, rushing outside.
And you're in your office at the Pentagon right now, Mick, reporting to us?
I am in the office, but I'm at the opposite side of where this crash occurred.
All right. Why don't you see if you can gather some more information? Please, again, be careful, Mick. And we're going to go to Matt, who's going to be talking with Jamie Gangel.
All right. Yeah. Katie, thank you very much. I'm joined by Tom Brokaw, and we'll try and recap what's been going on all morning here on the East Coast and in Washington, D.C. in just a few moments. But we do want to go right now to NBC's or today's national correspondent, Jamie Gangel, with some more information. Jamie?
Matt, I just want to tell you that U.S. intelligence sources are confirming the reports that one of the planes was a hijacked flight, an American flight from Boston to Los Angeles. They are also now looking into what's going on at the Pentagon. They don't have any details, but they have now put government buildings around the city of Washington on a heightened state of alert. I think part of that is happening formally, but obviously people are seeing what's going on, and some people are leaving buildings as well simply because of the concern following these latest reports from the Pentagon.
All right, Jamie, thank you very much. Again, joined by Tom Brokaw, and Katie's back with us now, too. Let's try and recap. It's 9:47 Eastern Time. Try and recap what's going on so far this morning, and the news is terrible. Just before 9 o'clock.
At 8:42, actually.
8:42, a plane crashed into the right-hand tower of the World Trade Center, somewhat about 3/4 of the way up. You can see the smoke billowing from that point of the building. And then about 18 or 20 minutes later, a second plane, a large plane, we saw it actually on tape, hit the left-hand tower of the World Trade Center about halfway up. An enormous fireball on several sides of the building. People trying to be evacuated. There's the tape of the second plane hitting right there, even as people were trying to get out of the first building. We have confirmed reports now that there was one plane hijacked, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles. And that is apparently one of the planes used in this crash, Tom.
Matt, there's a report on Dubai television that, in fact, the group claiming responsibility is the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. This comes, ironically, on a day when the Israeli Foreign Minister, Shimon Peres, is scheduled to meet with Yasser Arafat. Of course, we've had the meeting in South Africa for the past several days, in which the Palestinians were accusing the Israelis of racism. The United States vacated that meeting, but there hasn't been one specific incident.
And the Israelis vacated that meeting
as well. And the Israelis vacated it as well, but there has not been one specific incident. It's also worth pointing out that terrorism also always has two prongs to it, the physical threat and now the psychological threat. This does seem to be surreal, but in fact it is real when you have an explosion of undetermined origin at the Pentagon, the most conspicuous symbol of American capitalism, the Twin Trade Towers here in New York, two deliberate attacks on those towers today, and we do not know for sure who is responsible.
And the Capitol, by the way, the U.S. Capitol has been evacuated. There have been evacuations taking place at the White House. Needless to say, many people in the Pentagon have left that building as well.
Airports and here, by the way, in this building in Midtown New York, they have asked a lot of people at 30 Rockefeller Plaza to leave. It's another high-rise Capitol building, which is in New York. I came down the length of Manhattan, and a lot of people were simply unaware of what had happened as you tuned in the radio, and then they began to get it. It's election day here in New York.
Primary day.
And what we have is something that most Americans thought could never occur.
As Larry Johnson, a terrorist expert I just spoke with a few moments ago, the former deputy director of the State Department Office on Counterterrorism, claimed this is a first, that he had never heard or seen anything like it. He talked about back in 1993 a German plane being hijacked, and there were fears when it was flown to New York that it might be crashed into something.
Now, this is a major development. The Federal Aviation Administration has shut down all air traffic nationwide. This country has been immobilized by these terrorist attacks in terms of air travel today, and we don't know where it goes from here. We'll just ask that you stay with us so that as we get hard information, we can share that with you. There's going to be a lot of speculation. The President has described this apparently as a terrorist attack. The FBI has confirmed that an American Airlines flight, Boston to Los Angeles, was hijacked. It's believed that that was the first plane that went into the Twin Trade Towers.
Let's go to James Kallstrom, Tom, if we could, the former director of the FBI here in New York. Mr. Kallstrom, I'm sure you've never seen anything like this. Do you have any information that might be helpful to us?
Well, not particular information on this tragedy, but certainly what an incredible tragedy. And, you know, all of us in law enforcement and prior in law enforcement have talked for years, and the public has seen the hatred in the world. They've seen the bombing of the World Trade Center. They saw the conspiracy to blow up the tunnels in the United Nations and the FBI building back in the 90s. They've seen the bomb at the USS Cole and the bombings of our embassies in Africa. So, I mean, we've known for some time now that this hatred exists, and now it looks like that it's culminated in this absolutely horrendous, incredible act against the United States.
Jim, as someone who's
Washington today.
I'm sorry, as someone who's investigated some of these crimes in the past, and when we think back to 1993 and the World Trade Center bombing and what it took in terms of coordination and planning to pull off that one bomb in the World Trade Center, can you even speculate as to what it might take to coordinate this, what we think so far is a three-pronged attack this morning?
Matt, it obviously took a lot of coordination. There's a lot of groups in the world that have the ability to coordinate these types of attacks. As you know, and most people should know, the United States is an open society. I mean, we've talked for years about the downside of having our borders basically open. And any given day, people fly into our airports undocumented and turned into the population. They're not certainly all terrorism. They're not terrorists, but I mean, we live in a free society, and I'm not espousing we change that. But it's very, very difficult for the FBI and law enforcement to keep track of this when we live in the society that we live in.
Jim, if you can stand by for just a moment, because Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon has some more information for us. Mick?
Katie, my colleague Chris Brown here at the Pentagon encountered some of those who survived, whatever it was, whether it was a bomb or an airplane crashing into the Pentagon. One of the survivors who was reportedly injured, had various lacerations, was on the second floor of the D ring. That is one ring inside the outer ring of the Pentagon, when suddenly there was this horrific blast, and he said that the second floor buckled upward, and then the third floor above him actually collapsed downward. The scene on the other side of the building, as it's being described to us, there are people being removed on stretchers. Security forces are evacuating the building right now, and according to the officials here at the Pentagon, they still don't know exactly what it was, but as you reported, Katie, eyewitnesses reported that in fact it was a plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
And Mick, any idea, I wasn't quite sure if you said this, about the number of people who might have been hurt or worse in this?
No idea at all, Katie. As you know, having worked here, on any given day, this is a small city, 25 to 30,000 people may be working here at any one time. That portion of the Pentagon, by the way, had just been remodeled and just reopened. If the crash had occurred just a few months ago, that section of the Pentagon would have been virtually empty. But at this time of day, early morning or mid-morning, the Pentagon's very busy. It's impossible to say how many casualties there may be. But there have been a large number of people cited being removed on stretchers. And again, as one survivor said, the floor just buckled up under him, and the roof caved in on him.
All right, Mick, thank you very much. We want to move a couple of miles away from you right now to the White House, where Bob Kerr is standing by. And Bob, we understand that building has now been evacuated?
Matt, that's true. It is utterly surreal. As soon as word came of the Pentagon incident, we were rather forcefully removed from the White House. The scene was one of administrators, cooks, whatever, running at fairly high speed all the way out of the building through the top gates. Then we huddled for a while in Lafayette Park across the street, and we've been moved now from there a block or so away. The offices along Jackson Place, which are across the street from the White House and adjacent to Lafayette Park, also have been evacuated. And in the most surreal of this morning's scenes here at the White House, a white plane, a very big jet, was flying an unusual pattern near the White House over Lafayette Park very slowly. It made one circle, and then we have not seen it since. There was a lot of concern about what that plane might be, but again, it's only speculation, but most people say that since flights have been cleared from U.S. airspace and it was a totally white plane, looked unusual to all of us, that it was a government plane of some kind.
We should point out that we're looking at pictures, Bob, as you speak, of the World Trade Center, because all of the camera crews have been evacuated from the White House as well. When do you expect President Bush to arrive there, Bob?
Well, Katie, he's coming back directly, and you figure it's about a 2-hour flight, so you can do the math. The reason I said that it was so surreal was that within just about 20 minutes ago, they were still conducting tours. You had hordes of tourists and others still in the White House on tour, lining up outside to get in. There seemed to be absolutely no unusual activity outside the White House until word came of the incident at the Pentagon. So it's been quite a dramatic shift here.
You know, in terms of responsibility, Tom and Matt and Bob, apparently a senior official from the Radical Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine denied on Tuesday the group had any connection to the plane crash. An anonymous caller had told television that it was behind the crash, but, quote, "I emphasize that the story released on television by an anonymous person is totally incorrect." Tassir Khaled, a senior official from the DFLP Politburo in the Palestinian territories, told Reuters. The DFLP is against hijacking planes and against endangering the lives of civilians who are not connected with the struggle of this region, he said.
There are going to be a lot of claims and counterclaims in the course of the next 24 hours or so. This is a task for investigators of extraordinary magnitude to try to determine who did this and how they got away with it. You think about an American Airlines flight that was on its way from Boston to Los Angeles, was hijacked in midair. They're now citing transmissions from the plane, so they have hard evidence of that, and then brought down here and made to fly into the Twin Trade Towers. Did one of the hijackers get control? Did they shoot the pilot? It boggles the mind beyond our ability to figure out what was going on.
You talk about transmissions. I was just curious. Have you had any evidence of what was said during those
They're just saying they're citing transmission to know that the plane had been hijacked. That's all that they're saying about it at this point. We also ought to remind everyone, once again, this is an exceptional development. The FAA has banned all takeoffs at all airports across America. This country, in terms of air travel, has been immobilized. A good portion of the nation's capital, the most powerful center in the world, has been immobilized as well as a result of these terrorist
attacks. And that's
attacks.
A very haunting description that Bob Kerr just gave of that low-flying aircraft near the White House, and one can only wonder if that was something that ultimately ended up in the Pentagon.
We just saw a live picture of what seemed to be a portion of the building falling away from the World Trade Center. If we can re-rack that to about 20 seconds ago, you'll see something dramatic happening, and I don't know whether it's another explosion or a portion of the building falling away, but something major just happened at that building. Here we go to the tape.
We have the tape.
And watch what happens in the left-hand tower. I don't know if this is the correct tape. There, something there is about to happen, falling away right there.
Yeah, it looks like a big chunk of it has just peeled away.
One can only hope that the area has been evacuated, but of course you wonder about all the emergency vehicles and the people who might have been injured early in the morning.
Well, you remember when the bomb went off in the basement of it in 1993, how much damage was done throughout that building, how much chaos there was at that time. These are two coordinated airplane attacks on the building on the upper reaches of it. That will have an enormous structural effect. Those buildings, I think that it's fair to say, will probably have to be brought down. It's too early to speculate on that, but there's been that kind of damage.
Let's talk again. You were talking about
we have somebody actually
this is a reporter here in New York from WNBC. You talk about the fact this plane was taken from Boston on the way to Los Angeles. The reports are that it was being diverted to JFK, and just for people who aren't familiar with the geography of this area, the southern tip of Manhattan would be very much near the flight, the landing pattern for JFK Airport. It could have been easy for a hijacker to pretend that he was taking that plane to JFK and veer off at the last minute.
Yeah, I heard one eyewitness say that over Washington Square, which is in the lower reaches of Manhattan, he saw a plane go over at about 1,000 feet, apparently the American Airlines flight, and then do what he described as a sharp right turn right toward the World Trade Center. He then lost sight of it.
And one eyewitness here in this AP report says he was getting off a PATH train to the World Trade Center and saw bodies falling out of the building. As he approached it, police told him to get out of the building immediately. He ran outside and watched people jump out of the first building, and then there was a second explosion.
This footage we're seeing right now shows that the damage is so severe. I mean, we had seen what seemed to be two fairly self-contained impact craters before, and now it appears something much more dramatic has happened to at least one of those towers.
These pictures are beyond belief.
We have a report that the second plane may have flown out of Newark, New Jersey. This is an official who was speaking on the condition of anonymity. Again, there is no confirmation of that. We just know that there were two planes that went in. The first one apparently was an American Airlines flight that was from Boston to Los Angeles. We're now seeing it from the harbor view of this continuing damage and destruction to the World Trade Center.
Incidentally, Tom, I just want to interrupt you for 2 seconds because apparently Jamie Gangel has some more information for us. Jamie?
Spoken again to U.S. officials with access to the highest intelligence, and they are now confirming that it does appear that at the Pentagon it was a plane. Again, they are saying they believe now a third plane was involved at the Pentagon.
And of course, this has been the nightmare, Katie, for national security officials for a long time. We talk about nuclear bombs and those kinds of exchanges or invasions, but everyone has been terribly worried about the suitcase-sized bomb of some kind, or an airplane, or an attack on our subways in the large cities. And this, obviously, no one had anticipated. 3 airplanes that were deliberately aimed at critical targets in America. We can only hope that it's over for today, but officials are taking no chances on all that. They're evacuating all critical buildings because, as Mr. Johnson said earlier, this is an open society. James Kallstrom from the FBI also pointing out that almost anyone can come in here. They have access to so many instruments that can be used as instruments of attack and terrorism, and that certainly has been the case today.
Let's go to our State Department correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, what can you tell us?
Well, this from the FBI. The State Department has been evacuated. There was a meeting going on in the Operations Center. Other top officials were in the Situation Room at the White House. Colin Powell is in Bogota, Colombia, on a 2-day trip. But this very interesting information, Katie, Matt, and Tom, from the FBI, they had been operating a massive exercise from their hostage rescue unit. All of their top teams, about 50 personnel, helicopters, equipment, were in Monterey, California for the last 2 days, scheduled to fly back today commercially. So all of those people are out of place. It's fair to say, according to sources that we've talked to here at NBC, that the FBI rescue operations and other FBI operations are really in chaos right now because they can't reach their officials in New York. All of their phone lines are down, and now you've got all of their special experts on this stuck in Monterey, California, trying to get a military flight back because there are no longer commercial flights. So they are seriously out of pocket, and there is a real breakdown of the FBI anti-terror coordination team, which is, of course, the principal team that would lead any effort and was so effective under Jim Kallstrom in New York City during the World Trade Center bombing and the TWA explosion, which of course turned out not to be terror.
Andrea, is the State Department taking this claim of responsibility from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine seriously? Are they giving any credence to that, or are they dismissing it, or how do they feel about who might have been responsible for this?
I think it is far too early for them, even the best experts in the government, to figure this out. They have one instant reaction, as you know, and it could be wrong, but their immediate reaction in a case like this would be to look toward Osama bin Laden and the collateral groups connected to him, simply because he has proved with the embassy bombings in Africa that he is the one terror leader who is capable of this kind of highly coordinated attack. The bombings went off in Tanzania and in Kenya almost simultaneously. It was extraordinarily well coordinated. They proved their case to a jury effectively and have managed to develop a great deal of information from sources, from in fact turning some former members of his network.
Andrea?
So they believe, Tom, that he is the most likely person, but it's far too early to say anything.
We want to tell you that American Airlines has confirmed that one of its flights, American Airlines Flight number 11 from Boston's Logan Airport, scheduled to go to LAX. It left at 8 a.m. this morning. 45 minutes later, it was diverted into the World Trade Center. It was the airline that was involved. We can only assume on a popular flight like that it probably had a capacity load of passengers and crew on board. There was a hijacking. That was the first plane that was involved. We don't know about the second plane yet, nor do we know the origins of a third plane that deliberately flew itself into the Pentagon this morning near the heliport. NBC Jim Miklashevsky now has been forced to evacuate that building, and so we'll have to wait till we hear from him.
Saw some pretty dramatic pictures from the Pentagon just moments ago, Matt.
Let's go back to a few seconds ago. This is now about an hour after the first impact. We saw some dramatic footage of a portion of one of the Twin Towers, actually it appearing to fall away from the rest of the building. Can we go to the tape now? Here we go, right here. This is, I mean, when you look at it, the building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
Let's go to Bob Bazell, who is at St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob, what's going on there? What can you tell us?
Katie, St. Vincent's Hospital is one of the hospitals that's closest to the World Trade Center. In the last few minutes, ambulances have been coming in one right after another. Most of the people they're bringing in have second and third degree burns, very serious burn victims. They say the smoke inhalation people will probably be the most serious, but they're not even close to getting to them yet. There's a triage operation that's going on in the area. Ambulances are being dispatched to every hospital in New York City. The entire staff of this hospital has come in from wherever they are, and it's true at hospitals across New York City. They're standing there as soon as an ambulance pulls in. Dozens of medical workers rush up to it, but it's a carnage that's just beginning. Everybody here, the emergency service workers I spoke to who have been down into the World Trade Center site, say this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be massive amounts of casualties.
Bob, what are they telling you about people? Were there many people inside the building, or is it just too early to tell where the people were?
Well, there were certainly, probably hundreds, even thousands of people in the building, even though it was before 9 o'clock on the start of the usual work period, because it's just such a large area. So the number of casualties is just enormous, and they're just beginning to sort it out and just starting to get to the first few that they can get to. But the ambulances are just coming in. They're lined up. Every ambulance in New York City has been summoned. They're standing in a queue. They go in as soon as they can get a victim and bring them up here right away.
Bob, we're also looking at the lower end of Manhattan now as a result of the collapse of one World Trade Center. That whole financial district is now engulfed in smoke and debris, and there probably is going to be a lot more smoke inhalation problems as a result of
almost certainly, Tom. I was actually standing and saw that collapse, and everybody here just gasped, and even the medical workers and the ambulance attendants, when they saw that people who are used to tragedy, grabbed each other and hugged each other, and some started to cry.
And of course, one wonders about the triage unit.
Exactly, we're close to the base of that building trying to evacuate people. And when a building of that size falls, it does not fall in its own footprint.
No, absolutely. I'm several blocks north of there, so I don't know what that area looks like, but one can only imagine.
Well, the consequences go on, not just to the World Trade Center and to the poor people who were trapped and caught there, but of course that is the heart of the world financial markets, which have now been shut down effectively as well. So the ripple effect continues this morning as we all try to adjust psychologically and intellectually to what we are witnessing here. It is difficult to comprehend, but this country, the strongest country in the world, has been the target of a major coordinated terrorist attack, and the end is not over yet, even if it's confined to just these three targets. The ripple effect goes on. All air traffic has been shut down. There will be no financial markets in place today. Business has been stopped across the country.
And of course, who knows the human toll that will be the result of this action. Matt actually just pointed out to me on any given day, 50,000 people, Tom, work at the World Trade Center.
And at 8:45 in the morning, if they're not in the building, they're around the building. That's a beehive of activity down there. There is no more active area in terms of pedestrian traffic.
I hate to keep going back to the collapse of that tower, but if you consider that this plane hit at mid-structure, and that would have probably taken out the electrical in the building where elevators wouldn't work, and people struggling to get some way out of that tower, and it takes a long time to come down over 100 stories, and to think about the possible loss of life that just occurred by the collapse of that southeastern tower is just amazing. Minna Kathuria is with the Today Show, and she apparently saw the collapse of one of those towers. Minna?
Yes, hi, Matt.
Tell me what you saw.
Well, on the corner of Duane and West Broadway, walking down towards the Twin Towers, and it just collapsed. It looked like it looked sort of like the building just demolished. Smoke, clouds, clouds of smoke everywhere. People running towards me. I was going towards the Twin Towers. People were going away from the away from the towers, and it was just people running like I've never seen a scene like it.
Have you, from where you were, Minna, did you see many of the injured being treated? Is there any indication as the type of perimeter that the EMS people were dealing with?
No, I hadn't gotten that close yet. They were sort of blocking off the street. Now what they're doing is totally clearing out the area. And more emergency officials are coming in to help.
Can you just give me an idea of the reaction of people down there, Minna? Just pedestrians?
That's everyone in tears. People who were, I met some woman who was in the building to the right of where the first thing happened, and just all crying, wondering if the people that they know in the buildings next door are okay.
Minna, thank you very much. Minna, take care of yourself. Jamie Gangel, our national correspondent, is on the phone now with some more information. Jamie?
Katie, as you well know, buildings around town are being evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. The White House has been evacuated. and the Pentagon has been evacuated. Intelligence officials tell me that they do believe at the Pentagon that that was a third plane going down. They have had, the intelligence sources that I've talked to say that they have not received any claim of responsibility yet.
Jamie, have you gotten any information from Reagan National Airport as to air traffic in the area this morning, or anybody who might have somehow traced this plane or figured out from where it came or where it was going?
They still do not have any of those details yet. It is almost impossible. They were confused for a long time as to whether it's a bomb or a plane. They say now that it appears to be a plane, but they say that that is all the information that they have. As you know, the FAA has shut down all aircraft now, and they are now going back and trying to sort that out. But they do not have any information on that yet.
Do they know what type of plane it might have been?
There is no, unfortunately, they just don't have that yet.
All right, Jamie. Thank you very much, Jamie. We'll be talking with you.
It goes without saying this is the most serious attack in the United States in more than 100 years. Not since the War of 1812, and certainly the damage that we did to ourselves during the Civil War has this country suffered this kind of damage within its interior. Obviously, Pearl Harbor, which triggered World War II, was a horrific event as well, but there has never been an event to match the magnitude of this one, in which everything has been shut down in terms of air traffic. The national capital has been immobilized, the White House, State Department, Pentagon has been attacked, the financial markets have been shut down. There's an untold loss of life here in Manhattan, the nerve center of America, to say nothing of what's going on at the Pentagon.
When's the last time? I mean, this is a shot of New York City and downtown Manhattan that many people can't remember.
It looks
like one tower.
It looks like a movie, frankly, that this is unfolding, and it combines the horror of the TWA Flight 800 bombing and the Murrah Federal Building, because it's both of these incidents, of course, coming together in the most horrific way.
By now, I would guess that everyone is up across all the time zones in America. It's 7:15 in the West, obviously, but for those of you who are just joining us at 8:45 Eastern Time, 8:42 Eastern Time today, an American Airlines flight, Flight 11 from Boston to LAX, was crashed into one of the World Trade Center buildings. 15 minutes later, another plane hit the other one. That building has now collapsed. Within an hour of those two attacks, the Pentagon was hit, now we're told, by a plane, an untold number of casualties there. President Bush has been on the air. He was in Florida at the time, saying apparently this was a terrorist attack. Everyone now believes that, carefully coordinated from the air. And the consequences of it, in terms of human loss and the effect on this country, are still to be determined.
We're going to break away briefly from our national coverage in New York to bring you news from here in Washington on these events.
As you can see, Megan McGrath is live at the Pentagon from Columbia Pike, very near the Pentagon. Megan, what can you tell us about the latest happening there?
Joe, I can't hear you. I'm assuming that you can hear and see me at this point. We are on Columbia Pike. If you take a look behind my shoulder, you can see the south side of the Pentagon. Actually, just moments before this happened, after the World Trade Center incident, we were headed from a different location to National Airport. We were on 395 when all of a sudden we heard a boom and we saw this huge fireball rise from the Pentagon. We knew immediately that something terribly wrong had happened, and we made our way to this location. We originally pulled up, there's a gas station nearby, had a really good view of the south side of the Pentagon. Smoke, flames, it was just a real mess. Very, very shocking. And of course, people were running around. The Navy Annex is located nearby. There was all kinds of smoke in the area. People were very, very confused. There was a construction crew nearby. They didn't understand what happened, and people were just running toward the scene, trying to see if they could be of any assistance, trying to figure out what happened. Now, I have an eyewitness here.
Is a very high priority of this hospital. And the staff have been doing a heroic job in terms of responding.
This morning when she saw what happened, can you tell me, you say that you saw a plane actually strike the side of the Pentagon. Tell me exactly what you saw.
I saw a plane going down, big plane, commercial liner type, going down full speed and just inside the side of the Pentagon. Obviously, it was going in the Pentagon purposely. And we were driving down Columbia Pike,
and it just flew right over us. As I said, full speed. And I told my husband, it's going in the Pentagon, it's going in the Pentagon. And then we heard the huge crash, saw this fireball and flame and smoke and...
So you actually saw the plane impact the side of the building?
Yes, I did.
Just one plane?
Just one plane.
Tell me a little bit about the size of the plane. Did you see any commercial markings, any markings at all on the plane?
I didn't see any marking because it was, we just saw the underneath portion of it. So, and it just, as I said, was going full speed. So we didn't have time really to see anything. Plus with the trees, you know, maybe if I could have looked at it longer, maybe I would have seen something. But with the trees there, the trees line, we didn't see any type of marking. But it was a big plane, maybe 737. My husband said 747, but I'm not positive. I don't know for sure. But it was big. Definitely the kind of plane you get on when you want to fly to LA or wherever.
Now, we've been here probably about the same length of time as you have. I have heard a total of 3 booms, that initial boom, and then I heard 3 less large booms, but booms nonetheless. Have you heard the same thing?
Yes, I did. I did. Smaller explosions. Maybe it's inside the building, some gas lines exploding or something. I don't know. But we heard the other explosions. I don't see any other smoke anywhere, so I suppose it's from inside the building.
Okay, Isabel James, thank you very much for joining us. So there is a certain amount of chaos. From what we can kind of gather from here, it looks like they have let everybody out of the Navy Annex. There are just a lot of people wandering in the parking lot, and as you can see over there, a lot of them sitting up on the ridge and just watching as emergency crews arrive on the scene and do their job. And of course, everybody is trying to piece together exactly what happened. I mean, this was very unexpected. I can just give our example. We were just driving by, just happened to be in the same location as the Pentagon, when all of a sudden there was this big boom. It was quite sudden, it was quite loud, there was a fireball. We couldn't actually see the Pentagon itself when the explosion occurred because we were up on the highway. We saw the cloud of smoke and the fireball rise above the freeway, and we knew what direction it was coming from. We knew it was in the vicinity of the Pentagon, and that's when we arrived here on the scene. Should say that as soon as we got here, there were flames again on the south side of the Pentagon, and a short time later, I would say, we heard, and these are approximate times, we heard roughly 10 minutes later a smaller explosion. Didn't see anything unusual. The building was already on fire and was already smoking, so I don't know whether it was perhaps a gas line inside the building or something else entirely. But we have, since the initial explosion, have heard 2 smaller explosions, but we just don't have the information about what exactly happened there. But you just heard from the eyewitness. In fact, she's the second person that I have talked to who says that they saw a plane actually slam into the side of the Pentagon. And of course, in light of what happened in New York this morning, certainly is an interesting turn of events. But in terms of the rescue effort, we have been seeing emergency personnel arriving on the scene ever since this happened. You can see there appears to be, I don't know, John, can you see there's a military some military personnel up here on the ridge. This ridge right here, a lot of people have been coming out of the annex, and a lot of cars have been stopping on the highway, and people have been getting out of their cars, and they've been up on this ridge because you get a pretty good view of what's going on. And you can see that the military personnel are now telling them to get off the ridge, and they're going to be clearing out the area. We're going to try to stay here to keep you on top of what's going on and what we can see from our vantage point, but we'll have to wait and see what the military tells us to do. Back to you all.
Okay, thanks very much, Megan. And I want to give you this apparently a portion of the Pentagon has collapsed, according to the Associated Press. Also, according to the Associated Press, this morning, there is a report that General Richard Myers, the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that prior to the crash into the Pentagon, military officials had been notified that another hijacked plane had been heading from New York area to Washington. He said he assumed that the hijacked plane from New York to Washington was the one that hit the Pentagon. But again, you can see a portion of the Pentagon there has collapsed in that very dramatic picture.
Meanwhile, all government buildings in the District of Columbia, including the State Department and the White House, have been evacuated. As we've heard, all commercial traffic throughout the U.S. has been halted. Let's go to Cheryl Johnson, who is with Metro, who can tell us what these events, what kind of effect they've had on Metro trains and buses throughout our area. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
So far, we have closed our Pentagon Metro station, which is, of course, nearest the Pentagon itself. And in addition to that, we're not sending trains across the Yellow Line Bridge. So we're using our buses to do what we call a bus bridge, or take people from L'Enfant Plaza Station to Pentagon City, because, again, we are not sending trains across the Yellow Line Bridge. And, of course, at the Pentagon Station, we're doing a bus bridge from Arlington Cemetery to Pentagon City.
Okay, so if you wanted to get to National Airport from the district, you'd take a bus from the Pentagon Station to, how does that work?
You would take a bus from either the L'Enfant Plaza Station to Pentagon City,
okay,
and then continue your commute, and that's the Yellow Line. Or if you're on the Blue Line, you would get off at Arlington Cemetery to catch a bus, and then you would go past the Pentagon Station by bus, and then get off at Pentagon City to continue your commute on the Blue Line to get to National Airport.
Okay, of course, once again, all airports across the country have been shut down by the FAA.
Well, if that's the case, then I'm sure people are attempting to just use the Metro to get to where they need to get to at this point, because I understand the federal government has released employees, and I can look out my window and see gridlock on the streets already, traffic gridlock.
I'm sure. Thank Cheryl Johnson, thank you very much.
And listen, be aware that, it's very hard to get through on the phone, so if you call us and you're not able to get through, that's because so many of the circuits, both cell phones
Excuse me, Cheryl, just a moment. We're just getting a report from the Associated Press that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. We are just hearing this from the Associated Press, a car bomb exploding outside the State Department here in Washington. We have no details of that, but we'll bring them to you as they come in to us. Let's go back to Megan McGrath, who is near the Pentagon off Columbia Pike. Megan?
Yeah, if you take a look behind me, you can see in the last few minutes we've actually seen that section of the Pentagon where the explosion took place. It has actually collapsed in a rather large section. You can see that the smoke is still billowing from the area. We still are seeing some flames coming from inside the building, and the whole section has literally collapsed upon itself. That will give you an idea of just how tremendous this explosion was. Just to be able to do this kind of damage to such a secure building, it just really indicates how powerful this was. And again, we were driving by the area, and you felt kind of a tremor as you were driving by. You could feel a disturbance in the air, and then that's when we looked over, and that's when we saw the fireball and saw the damage that was done. Now we are being told by military officials to clear the area. There were a lot of people, a lot of folks in cars, a lot of employees from the Navy Annex who actually left their building, abandoned their cars in the street, and were up on this ridge taking a look at the damage and watching the rescue effort. All of those people are being cleared out of the area at this point. And that's really all we can tell you. But if you just take a look at the side of that building, it really is quite dramatic. And of course, emergency crews are here on the scene trying to secure the situation. But at this point, they are evacuating everybody out of this area. Back to you.
Thank you, Megan. As we heard from Cheryl Johnson, there are massive traffic jams around as we continue to follow the impact of this here in Washington, D.C.
Apparently all federal employees have been released from their offices, and that is going to cause major problems. Once again, the latest news is that we have received word from the Associated Press that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That, according to senior law enforcement officials quoted by the Associated Press. And now we're going to go to Jerry Edwards with Metro Traffic Control, and he can perhaps show us some other pictures and tell us what the effect on traffic is. Jerry?
Barbara and Joe, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, as the federal offices now are being released and people are leaving downtown, let me bring up a couple of the traffic cameras. We are looking at particularly tough traffic in many locations. We'll start over Northern Virginia on 395. This is outbound traffic, the left side of your screen. The camera's a little blurry. Outbound 395. Delays begin back at the 14th Street Bridge. You can see police have blocked off the exit, which would take you up toward the Pentagon for obvious reasons. So 395 now, coming out of downtown, is backing up. And again, there's no exit to the Pentagon, which is causing a lot of confusion. Route 110 is closed. Let's switch gears and show you the inbound side of the Roosevelt Bridge. I'm sorry, this is the outer loop of the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. No problems at the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, no accidents. It's all volume right now as people are leaving. This is, in essence, an afternoon rush hour we're dealing with, so be prepared for that. Here we are with another shot of traffic getting across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. If we get additional information, what we're being told now, of course, all the Potomac bridges, the Memorial, the Roosevelt, and of course traffic coming up the 14th Street Bridge is going to be diverted. 395 is closed at the exit for the Pentagon. Folks in Maryland don't have any problems right now. We've taken a few calls, people concerned about traffic in Maryland. That's not a problem right now. If we can go to V4 on the fly here, guys, and see the 14th Street Bridge. This is the inbound side, which kind of surprises us at this point, where 395 northbound to the inbound 14th Street Bridge is open. However, at this point, it appears that most of the traffic that would come off the Southeast-Southwest Freeway headed into downtown, of course, is going to be completely closed off. So again, we will keep you updated. But what we're dealing with now, of course, is everyone's leaving downtown, headed outbound, so the inbound side is not as important as the outbound side. We're dealing with basically an afternoon rush hour, plus all the activity that's going on. Obviously a very busy time. We are here and we will keep you updated throughout all of this. Barbara and Joe, back to you.
Right,
Thanks
Jerry.
very much, Jerry. We're going to show you another picture of the Pentagon where we could see that the structure had collapsed upon itself right where the plane apparently hit, and now the Pentagon officials are evacuating everyone from the area there, according to the Associated Press, because they fear another plane could be en route to the Pentagon.
Senior law enforcement officials say a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That from the AP we're just getting. It was already among buildings here in the nation's capital that had been evacuated, so people had been asked to leave. They were leaving. We have just heard that the second tower has collapsed in New York City. The second World Trade Center tower has just collapsed in New York. We're looking at a live picture there. The first one collapsed about an hour ago now, and now the second apparently has done the same.
Well, this is not only devastating damage, it is devastating to look at this, but yes, the second tower has now collapsed. This after two separate plane crashes into one plane into each of the towers earlier this morning. There has been a rash of terrorist activity, of course, a plane crashing into the Pentagon. Here we're looking at video now We're going to rejoin NBC coverage now. You can see it start to collapse.
That's a videotape replay.
We are back at 10:30 Eastern Time on this Tuesday morning, this horrific, incredible, not to be believed Tuesday morning. You are looking at live pictures of the World Trade Center where just a few minutes ago, within the last minute actually, the second Twin Tower collapsed. Just to recap, if you're just joining us, around 8:42 Eastern Time this morning here in New York City, a plane crashed into the right Twin Tower of the World Trade Center about 2/3 of the way up the building, leaving a huge gaping hole, a huge fire, and tons of billowing smoke. About 25 minutes later, a second jet, believed to be a 727 or a 737,
some reports of a 757 even,
then crashed in the second Twin Tower. The first plane, incidentally, was en route from Boston, Massachusetts to Los Angeles.
Here's the video, I think, of the second plane striking the tower.
That's right. We're not sure the origin of that plane, is my understanding. The first plane that caused that hole on the right-hand side in the other Twin Tower was from Boston to LAX to Los Angeles. It was Flight 11, American Airlines. We have confirmed that that plane was hijacked. What happened following the hijacking rather, is unclear. We should note that about an hour after the first collision at the Pentagon, reportedly another plane crashed into the Pentagon, which is just outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. All air traffic has been stopped.
Government buildings have been evacuated, as have other buildings across the country. The Sears Tower in Chicago was evacuated. You can imagine that other buildings in major cities and small cities around the country are probably being evacuated as well.
There's an unconfirmed report of a car bomb at the State Department. We haven't not been able to pin that down. There is also, Jim McLeshevsky was told that there was an unconfirmed report of another air hijacking. We share this with you not in an attempt to in any way exacerbate what is already a terrible situation, but so much has come true today based on these early reports, that we want you to have as much information as we can possibly get. At the Pentagon, all people outside were told to take cover just moments ago, but Jim Miklashevsky said the skies were clear.
There was an unconfirmed report of another hijacking with a plane headed towards Washington. Again, we don't want to sound alarmist, but that is something that Mick heard while he was at the Pentagon. We also want to mention that the president is en route from Longboat Key, Florida, where he was there to visit an elementary school to talk about literacy. Obviously, clearly, his agenda has changed dramatically. He will convene a meeting of the National Security Council as soon as he gets home. Colin Powell is also on his way back from Lima, Peru. He was scheduled to be in Bogota, Colombia.
And probably not at the White House. They'll probably take him to a safe location. There are a number of them, some in the hills of Virginia, as you know. And my guess is that Air Force One is in the unusual situation of having a fighter plane escort on its way back from Florida today. That's where we stand.
Think about the loss of life that we could have seen this morning. If you think about the fact that when full, the World Trade Centers hold about 50,000 people, no telling how many people were at work before 9 o'clock this morning and then shortly after 9 o'clock in the other tower. But if you look at this picture here, Tom and Katie, at Lower Manhattan, it appears that terrorists have succeeded this time in doing what terrorists tried to do back in 1993.
This is war. This is a declaration and an execution of an attack on the United States, two of our most conspicuous symbols of the American system of capitalism. The Pentagon, which of course is the headquarters of the most mighty military in the world, was attacked today as well. The White House has been evacuated. The State Department has been evacuated. Financial markets have been immobilized. All flights taking off after these attacks were grounded.
International flights have been sent to Canada.
It turns out it's transatlantic flights only going to Canada now. So there has been great chaos visited upon this country, to say nothing, as you pointed out, Matt, so importantly, of the still untold loss of life. And it's going to be horrendous. We don't know yet what the exact numbers are, but we can only tell you by looking at those pictures that you can guess as well as that we can, that there are going to be a lot of people who are not going to be able to escape that.
Back in 1993, when the bomb blew up in the basement of the World Trade Center, so many survivors talked about how long it took them, with no power in the elevators, to walk down the smoke-filled stairways. And you think about how many people were still trying to escape those buildings when first one and then the second tower collapsed.
And of course, the triage unit that has been set up. Area hospitals are all receiving victims. And as Matt said, 50,000 capacity when everybody is in the building. But many people at 8:42 a.m. here in New York are at their desks, working in their offices. One young man or one man was reached by phone and was asked what is happening there, and he said, we are blanking dying here. And there was screaming and yelling and pure chaos, understandably, going on in the background.
There's a picture of Lower Manhattan, ladies and gentlemen, the most important city in the world in so many ways. And now it has been attacked by terrorists at the World Trade Center, and the damage is beyond our ability to tell you in great detail.
Let me mention that,
I was going to say, here's what the president said. He canceled an education appearance in Florida. Here's what he said just a short time ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I, unfortunately, will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary Rod Page and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and I've ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
That was George W. Bush about an hour ago, speaking from Longboat Key, Florida. He is en route to Washington, D.C. We're looking at some pictures on the ground, or we were, of apparently some of the victims. He is on the ground.
Quite extraordinary. These are the emergency workers who are coming back It was just about 10 minutes ago that we described to you the possibility of that North Tower collapsing. About 5 minutes after we went off the air, it did collapse. Once again, we have no idea at this point the loss of life. I can only tell you there were hundreds of emergency workers down there, about 5 or 6 blocks. It took probably about, I would say, no more than 50 or 60 seconds for that dust cloud, dust and smoke, to literally make it the 5 or 6 blocks up here and begin to envelop us, at which point we started to move out of the way. There were literally dozens and dozens of firemen who were trying to run past us. In fact, our cameraman even put one of the captains in his car and drove him down to a command post. The people who you see here are pretty much all emergency workers. Many of them that I have seen in the last 2 to 3 minutes, quite frankly, are coming out of here. And remember this, these are professionals. They're coming out of there looking literally stunned, in shock, many of them, struggling for breath, obviously in serious distress. Breathing problems are the biggest problem for those who manage to make it safely out of that area down below us. You can't see much more than a block south of me right now, and the World Trade Center probably stands about 10 blocks south of where I am at this moment. And as you can see now, the dust is beginning to pick up here. It really depends on which way the wind blows as to whether or not we get heavy dust or not. But at this point, I can tell you that in the first few minutes, emergency workers were trying just basically to get out of there, to survive. You could see that written in their faces. The situation was so desperate, they just wanted to get out of there. Now, many of them are beginning to regroup. A couple of them asked me where their commander might be. They're trying to get together and go back in there and try to take care of the people who obviously are in serious trouble. There's no other way to describe it. The language here, at times, if I slip into language which seems a little melodramatic, forgive me, but this is a circumstance which is very, very difficult to describe in many ways without sounding melodramatic. Certainly in more than 20 years of covering horrific events, this is something that I've never seen before. As we say, the emergency workers now beginning to try to gather themselves. Over there you can see a police emergency service unit. They're trying basically now to reestablish some kind of a safe perimeter. And many of the emergency workers basically just happy to be alive. Certainly that picture tells it all. Many of them just happy to be alive at this point, having survived what is an extraordinary event, the collapse of 2 towers. As we said earlier in our report, 110 stories each. I will tell you that what fell, what I saw fall, had to be at least 40, 50 stories of that building at first. The skeleton was left at about, I would say, the 50 or 60th floor after the shell, after the structure of the building fell down. The skeleton, the steel skeleton, was literally sheaved off, and it took probably about another 30 seconds before the skeleton collapsed into the street. That was the last we saw of the World Trade Center, and that was maybe 10 minutes ago when that final skeleton, the metal skeleton, steel skeleton, collapsed into the street.
That was NBC's Pat Dawson. Again, he's standing about 10 blocks from where the World Trade Center towers used to stand. You're looking at the collapse of one of those towers right now. We now have an AP News alert out of Pittsburgh. Officials at Somerset County Airport are confirming the crash of a large plane just north of the airport. That's about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Again, officials at Somerset County Airport confirmed the crash of a large plane north of that airport, which is located about 80 miles to the southeast of the city of Pittsburgh. We do not know whether that crash of that plane is related to what has become an obvious terrorist attack both here in New York City and in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon.
Matt, we just got a late word that State Department security officials are denying those reports of a car bomb at the State Department. Betsy Stewart is at the C Street entrance and also says there's no sign of a car bomb. Betsy Stewart is one of our producers who's very familiar with the State Department. The building has been evacuated. Top officials are still believed to be in the operations center, however. Those are highly secured areas in terms of penetration physically and otherwise. Colin Powell, as Andrea reported earlier, was headed for Lima, Peru, but he's done a U-turn and he's coming back. The president is on his way back. He'll have a National Security Council meeting, we think probably at around 11:30 or perhaps around noon. That is likely to take place either at Andrews Air Force Base or in some more secure location. the White House has been evacuated, especially with this report of another plane going down, this time in the Pittsburgh area. There were planes in the air when the order went out that there would be no more takeoffs, so we don't know how much more damage these terrorists had in mind.
Let's go to Bob Hager, who is, of course, NBC's aviation expert. Bob, what kind of information are you getting from your sources?
Not a lot, Katie, from the FAA. For instance, they are not talking about any possible hijacks. And normally they can tell when there's a hijack in progress because the pilot, the original pilot of the plane, has various buttons that he can push that set off a code and tell them that there were hijacks. But maybe as a matter of security, they're not saying anything about that. They did stop all takeoffs in the U.S. at 9:25 this morning, and then for pilots that were in the air, the question came up what to do about them, and they were given some discretion to continue on to their destination, so long as it was not the New York or Washington area, or divert to an airport if that's what they wanted to do. I saw the blast at the Pentagon, not the blast take place, but moments after it. I'd been at National Airport trying to get up to New York, and you could see that smoke billowing out of the Pentagon. I can give you a little description of what it's like on the streets of Washington, because it was quite crowded trying to work my way back here to NBC. They have now given not only the White House and those key buildings like the U.S. Capitol, but at this point they've given all federal employees the word to leave their offices and get home.
Right.
So there are traffic jams in Washington.
Okay, Bob, I'm sure you're going to get more information for us momentarily, but first we want to go to Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon, who has some more information. Mick?
Katie, they're still clearing people away from the Pentagon. Still, security forces believe that there may be another incoming plane headed in the Washington region. But there was a very telling, dramatic moment just a second ago when a U.S. Air Force F-16 flew very low level, did a wide sweeping turn around the Pentagon and back over Washington. And as one Air Force officer standing near me said, "My God, they're now flying air cover over Washington." A very dramatic moment, a milestone in what Tom has already described as a declaration of war, terrorist war against the U.S. Katie?
Let's go back and show you the pictures of lower Manhattan, where the situation only gets worse, not better. That is the financial district of the world. It's also a residential area and a great commercial area. Both Twin Trade Tower buildings now have collapsed onto the ground. There is an untold loss of life. The ripple effect goes on with all the smoke and dust that is spread out across that very densely populated area. It goes down below ground as well as in the high-rise buildings there. There are many residential structures in that area as well. Some heroic rescue workers were down there trying to get people out of the building when the first building came down, and then the second building did as well. Without any sound, and looking at this, there is a kind of a surreal quality. But that is the epicenter of a great, great national tragedy and a great loss of life. No question about it this morning.
We're talking about people who were hurt, perhaps killed in this blast. Many of them have been brought to area hospitals, including St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob Bazell is there. Bob, what's the latest?
Well, Katie, ambulances continue to stream in. Several New York City streets have been closed. Major avenues have been closed off so that ambulances can continue to come in. In addition, the New York City subway system has now been closed down, and several buildings that were not involved in the World Trade Center area have been shut down, and people have been told to go home, but a lot of them are just wandering aimlessly on the street. Many people openly weeping and hugging each other. This is clearly is a time that, as Tom described, is very close to the beginning of a war, and but the casualties do keep coming in. Burns, smoke inhalation, very severe, and again, all the medical people that I've talked to say this is just the tip of the iceberg. We expect casualties to be coming in all through the night and way into tomorrow and beyond.
Bob, if you could just stand by for a moment, because we have this report from AP that I'm just simply going to read. A large plane crashed Tuesday morning just north of the Somerset County Airport, about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. Airport officials said the plane, believed to be a Boeing 767, crashed around 10 a.m. about 8 miles east of Jennerstown. According to County 911 dispatchers, WPXI-TV reported. The crash came the same morning that terrorists crashed two planes into the World Trade Center in New York City, and the twin 110-story towers collapsed. Explosions also rocked the Pentagon and the State Department, although that was refuted moments ago, and spread fear across the nation. There was no other immediate details on the Pennsylvania crash, and it was not clear whether the crash was related to the others. Again, that was a report, a bulletin that was just issued by the Associated Press.
You know what is so stunning about all of this, Matt and Katie, is that there has been no indication whatsoever that this very carefully coordinated massive attack was going to occur. There's been a complete intelligence failure here. And there will be, obviously, down the road, a price to pay for that.
Well, that's actually not all that surprising, Tom, because we've often talked in the past, following every terrorist event, about how vulnerable the United States is, and many terrorist experts say how unprepared they are. And the question, of course, is, can you ever prepare for an attack like this?
Well, that's true, but we also have people out there who are in listening posts, and we've penetrated these kinds of organizations, but to have this kind of an attack, this sophisticated, this efficient, striking at the heart of the nation's capital, striking at the heart of New York City, now, and if this is true that this plane went down as a result of this attack, we don't know whether it's the end of it. Right. This is a massively well-coordinated attack of some kind that is nothing short but of a declaration of war on this country.
And terrorist experts are now saying, and intelligence experts are now saying, that there are very short or very few number of terrorist groups that are capable of this kind of planning, and a couple of names come to mind, and I'm not going to throw them out now because we certainly don't have any reports. Before I go to Jamie Gangel, I just want to say that some of the descriptions coming from eyewitnesses in Lower Manhattan of these explosions occurring are chilling. One man talked about getting off a PATH train, that's a subway train, here in Lower Manhattan, and looking up at the building after the first explosion and seeing people jump out of the windows. We have no idea how high up, but hearing people on the ground scream each time another person jumped out of a window attempting to get to safety. And then when the second explosion occurred, he felt the heat of the explosion on the back of his neck. Jamie Gangel is our national correspondent. She's joining us now on the phone. Jamie?
Matt, you know, speaking of those intelligence officials that you were just mentioning, now finally we can no longer reach on the phone anyone at the CIA. Apparently the CIA has been evacuated. We know the National Security Agency, which is the electronic eavesdropping agency, which is south of Baltimore near Fort Meade, Maryland, that they have been shut down. What we're hearing from both places is that all non-essential personnel have been told to leave. And I can only imagine that probably they are trying to move some of their operations out of those buildings as well for backup procedure. But in addition to whatever intelligence was missed in all of this, we now have perhaps some problems gathering intelligence as those buildings are now being shut down.
Right, Jamie, thank you very much. Tom, let's go back and talk about something you mentioned a second ago, that is just, it shows the enormity of this situation. In addition to what we assume will be horrendous loss of life, all planes in this country have been grounded. I mean, you think about the impact that has, and I mean, is there ever a time we can imagine something like that ever happening before?
The most powerful nation in the world, and national security officials and terrorist experts have been saying for some time, a small band of very willful and sophisticated people can bring us to a halt, and they have done just that. There's a psychological terror as a result of all of this, as you can only imagine how it plays out across the country today. People looking in who don't live in New York or live in the nation's capital are wondering what happens around me. It is hard to overstate the consequences of all of this, and this is just the beginning. We'll be living with this story and dealing with the consequences of it for some time. The United States will change as a result of all of this. We already thought that there was a lot of security in America at the airports and so on, and yet there was a successful hijacking at Boston Airport today, and the consequences of that we're seeing on the screen here this morning. So this is going to change this country profoundly in not just the coming days, but the coming months, to say nothing, as you have been saying, Matt, of the horrific loss of life that we're witnessing.
On that subject, you know, and Katie and Tom, to complete a thought I started before, you both were out at the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, a much smaller building, and it took rescue workers more than a week to find all the people trapped in that wreckage. We have a building here two buildings of each 110 stories. It's mind-boggling to think of what it's going to take over these next days and weeks to find survivors or victims of these explosions.
And of course, it continues to be a terrifying situation because there are a number of planes up in the air as this took place, and a number of unconfirmed and frightening reports about those planes that we heard earlier from Jim Miklashevsky, that somebody had gotten word at the Pentagon that perhaps there is another plane, whether they were talking about the one north of Pittsburgh or it's completely unclear. And it's also unclear whether these planes that were en route to a destination have been grounded themselves. In other words, that they were emergency landings or what. I think it's very difficult to get any communication with airports all across the country because they're, I'm sure, completely chaotic.
Katie, you know from your time in Oklahoma City and all the time that you spent with the victims there, the psychological effect of all of this on this country and how it's going to affect our whole sense of security and, in a way, our sense of innocence about this is Fortress America. It couldn't happen here. We said that about the Murrah Federal Building. We even said it about Columbine High School. This is an incident of a whole different magnitude.
I have to say, I've never, ever, witnessed anything quite as horrific. I hate to keep saying it because we have seen these types of things play out in movies and, you know, in worst case scenarios and in dramatic renditions of this kind of incident, but certainly no one has ever seen this kind of thing unfold. And it is really shocking.
We want to go now. On the phone, we have Neil Livingston, who is an expert on terrorism. Mr. Livingston, can you hear me?
I can.
You know, we were talking about what it would take in terms of planning and coordination to pull off an attack like this with so many prongs. At least 2 attacks here in New York City, 1 in Washington, D.C. We don't know if the crash of that plane outside Pittsburgh is related, but give me an idea of how many groups there are in the country that would be capable of something like this.
Well, there are very few groups in the world capable of this kind of action. And you have to remember also that we have the people who hijacked these planes were going to a certain death as well. So they were suicide bombers in effect. And that probably suggests that this was not something like the Medellin cartel or one of the other groups that has the financial wherewithal and the infrastructure to carry out coordinated attacks.
Yeah, I know.
I think that obviously the finger of suspicion, and we're always very cautious about pointing that in any particular direction, but we have to look to the Middle East. We have to look to Osama bin Laden. We have to look at some Palestinian groups right now.
But even in the past, when we were talking about Osama bin Laden and his group, there have been intelligence experts who picked up conversations, transmissions that occurred before an attack to give some kind of indication, even if we didn't understand them till after the attack. Is it unusual that with so many prongs to an attack that there wouldn't have been some type of warning through intelligence sources?
Well, it's a myth that we always know that these things are coming down. Part of our problem is, and we just had a warning go out to our embassies and military bases in the Far East. That could have been a feint. That could have been a diversion. We have so many warnings these days that people, they tend to fade into the background noise unless we have real specific information about an upcoming attack. Generally, we don't take action. And these groups are very hard to penetrate. They're focused with bonds of kinship and people who have known each other for years. So it doesn't surprise me that we didn't know that this was coming.
All right, Mr. Livingston, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Benjamin Levy is at the scene near the World Trade Center. Actually, he's going to tell us precisely where he is and what he saw. Benjamin, can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Benjamin?
Yes?
Hi, it's Katie Couric. Can you tell me where you are and what you have seen or what you are seeing?
Well, right now I'm in Lower Manhattan, but I was working, I work at the Federal Building behind City Hall. And we were just sitting at our desks about 9 a.m. this morning. We heard a big explosion. Then about 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes later, we saw the other plane hit the building, the second tower, and then we just evacuated. And as we started to walk away, we turned around about maybe 15 minutes after we left the building, and the second tower just disappeared from sight. And I tell you, I've never seen anything more horrible in my entire life.
Did you see any people, any casualties, Mr. Levy?
We we bumped into a guy from Tower 1 who said that he had a chance to get out of the building after the plane hit the first one. He had a chance to get out of the second one, but he said that people were jumping out of the windows to get away from the fire.
Where are you now, Benjamin?
I'm in a hair salon in Lower Manhattan, talking to you guys.
Well, obviously, that was...
And was the whole federal building evacuated, Mr. Levy?
Yeah, well, we started running out of the building as soon as we saw the second explosion. And then I work on the 22nd floor. As soon as we were down at the bottom, they sounded the alarm, and then they announced evacuation. But most of us were already out.
How far physically are you actually from the World Trade Center?
Right now, or where I work?
No, when this happened.
About 6 blocks away.
6 blocks away. And you were able to get out pretty easily, and there were no kind of electrical problems in your building as a result of the impact of the fire or anything like that?
No, we got out pretty good, thank God.
And as that whole area down there, the City Hall, the Federal Building, and all the other commercial buildings, they've all been evacuated as well?
Well, yeah, as we were leaving, the police were telling all the shop owners to shut their shops and go home.
And that must be enveloped by the smoke and dust and everything that we see now, because that covers the entire lower end of Manhattan, which is a considerably large area, not only physically, but in terms of the financial networks, the commerce that is done there, a lot of residential areas.
Yeah, you could smell the smoke. And you could smell it, but it wasn't. We were walking away from it.
Benjamin Levy. Benjamin, thanks so much for talking with us. We appreciate it, and we're glad you're safe.
Katie, I've got just a little rundown here, if I can, Matt, for just a moment about what's going on around the country. The State Department officials have been moved into the State Department Training Center in Arlington, Virginia. The state has been evacuated, obviously. In Minneapolis, St. Paul International Airport shut down. The IDS Center in downtown Minneapolis, tallest building, evacuated. Georgia, all flights at Hartsfield Atlanta International Airport closed. The CNN Center, world headquarters of Cable News Network, was closed to the public. In Maryland, officials are tightening security throughout the state. Of course, that's the home of Andrews Air Force Base. Navy installations throughout the Hampton Roads, home to the world's largest Navy base, have been placed under increased security. In Pennsylvania, Philadelphia International Airport has been closed, and of course the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall are being closed as well.
In fact, all national monuments, Tom, I believe, have been evacuated and closed.
And California, the state has been put on the highest alert. They're on tactical alert in Los Angeles. The Department of Energy's Nuclear Weapons and Research Complex in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, put under heightened security.
It is now coming up on 10:59 East Coast time. We'll give you a recap of what we've seen so far in just a moment. Just a quick note from one of the hospitals downtown in New York City, where they say that hundreds of people have been burned from head to toe. This is from Dr. Stephen Stern at St. Vincent's Hospital in Greenwich Village. About 50 or 60 doctors and nurses standing by in scrubs. The entire entrance to the emergency room was lined with stretchers covered with white sheets. Doctors said the victims mostly had burns.
Of course, they're being treated in a number of area hospitals, including St. Vincent's, NYU. Downtown is just about 5 minutes away. As the spokesperson told us earlier, they've had a lot of experience dealing with problems at the World Trade Center from that February terrorist bombing in 1993. And obviously, they have all been mobilized, and emergency crews are working feverishly outside the World Trade Center.
You are looking at a live picture of Lower Manhattan at 11 o'clock East Coast time on a day of tragedy and terror in the United States. You're looking at what remains of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. Earlier this morning, just before 9 o'clock and just after 9 o'clock, 2 planes and individual attacks struck each tower of the World Trade Center, causing gaping holes in both towers. You're looking at a tape now after the first impact. And there is the second impact of a large jet flown, we now believe, deliberately into the second tower. It was a short time after that the towers collapsed. And then there was an attack in Washington, D.C. We now have confirmed reports that a plane crashed into the Pentagon. We have no reports of confirmed injuries or death. However, it's clear officials all across the country are now saying this is a deliberate terrorist attack on the United States. As Tom has put it so far this morning, this is a declaration of war by terrorists against the United States.
And of course, we should mention, by the way, Tom, before we talk about terrorism, that another large plane crashed as well, just north of Somerset County Airport, 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was a Boeing 767 that crashed around 10 o'clock this morning. and it is unclear whether the crash was related to the other crashes that took place this morning.
President Bush is en route back to Washington. The State Department has been evacuated. There's been that attack on the Pentagon. That has been evacuated. The White House has been evacuated. There will be an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. This is the most serious attack on the United States since Pearl Harbor. There has never been a terrorist attack of this magnitude, in fact, on any country in the world so far as we can tell. The untold loss of life in New York alone. We only know that there have been hundreds of burn victims brought to various hospitals. Both Twin Trade Tower centers have collapsed to the ground. That's a densely populated area, obviously. We don't know the number of casualties yet at the Pentagon, and we don't know the number of deaths in that plane that went down, as Katie pointed, north of Pittsburgh.
And what we've left out a piece of information, and we know for a fact that one of these planes that was crashed into the World Trade Center was hijacked from Boston this morning. It was American Airlines Flight 11 en route from Boston to Los Angeles. We had reports it had been diverted to JFK, and a short time later, perhaps while feigning a landing at JFK, it veered dramatically into the World Trade Center.
All air travel has been stopped. Airports have been closed across the country to planes departing. In terms of planes that are en route, it is unclear if they've made emergency landings or if they're reaching their final destinations. The White House has been evacuated. The State Department, the CIA has been evacuated. Of course, many, many buildings in Manhattan and lower Manhattan have been evacuated as well.
And transatlantic flights to this country are being diverted to Canada. Still, no claim of responsibility that is verifiable or credible at this time. Yasser Arafat has condemned this attack, saying it's shocking and appalling.
Of course, we should mention back in February of 1993 was when that bomb went off in the garage of the World Trade Center, killing 6 people, injuring 1,000 people. And that, of course, was an unbelievable scene. But compared to this
is what they intended to do back then.
Minor. Let's go to Bob Hager, who has some information for us. Bob?
Katie, I was just thinking as you commented there about the various planes involved. The one that we know of so far, because it's confirmed by American Airlines, is that Flight 11, which had been scheduled from Boston's Logan Airport to Los Angeles, that Flight 11 was hijacked this morning, and it is presumed that it may have been one of the planes that went into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. There were at least 2 more planes involved in this because the other tower was hit, and then the Pentagon was also, there were eyewitness accounts that it was a plane that went into the Pentagon, but so far we don't know the sources of those planes, whether they were commercial planes that had been hijacked, whether they were private planes, whether they'd been hijacked at all. And I would point out the report from Somerset County, Pennsylvania, is so far just local authorities commenting. The FAA has not confirmed that crash, so we're waiting to hear more, and I'm hearing just now, bear with me.
Bob.
Oh, FAA is now confirming, so this adds to those earlier rumors that there are several airplanes that are unaccounted for. So there were some rumors that there might have been other planes hijacked that we didn't yet know the outcome of it. And now the FAA is confirming that there are several, is the word I heard, several planes that are unaccounted for that were evidently hijacked and has not come to a conclusion yet.
Bob, we'd like you to get a list of as many of those as you can, as specifically as possible. We're going to show you now, we're going to replay a tape of the second attack on the World Trade Centers in slow-mo. There's the plane. As you can see, a large airline-type plane. And now the collision. Flown deliberately into the second one.
When they say several, Bob, do they give you any indication of what they're talking about?
Several is the description that I had, and that was just passed on to me a moment ago, so I wasn't talking personally to the FAA person, but several is the account I had.
And Bob, American Airlines, the Flight 11 out of Boston, do we know what exactly kind of plane that was and perhaps how many people were on board?
We do not yet, but I think we're going to get some additional information from American. They were supposed to be adding comment to this from Dulles Airport here in a few moments, so we might learn a little bit more about that. But right now, it's very important to worry about rumors and so forth. I'd like to hear some more confirmation that a plane really has crashed in Pennsylvania, for instance, since the FAA hasn't confirmed that. But I think one needs to be very careful here in this chaotic situation.
We have a report here that Osama bin Laden, who is often identified as the world's leading terrorist, warned 3 weeks ago that he and his followers would carry out an unprecedented attack on U.S. interests for its support of Israel. An Arab journalist with access said to him Tuesday in London.
Abdel Bari Atwan, editor of the London-based Al-Qud Al-Arabi newspaper, said Islamic fundamentalists led by bin Laden was almost certainly behind the attack of the World Trade Center in New York. Quote, it's most likely the work of Islamic fundamentalists. Osama bin Laden warned 3 weeks ago that he would attack American interest in an unprecedented attack, a very big one, Atwan told Reuters.
He has interviewed bin Laden, and he maintains close contact with his followers, according to Reuters. So that's the first report that we've had that Osama bin Laden may have been responsible. Obviously, it was a very sophisticated organization, carefully coordinated. It had to have its origins in this country. Louis Freeh, the FBI director, as he left office, said that his continuing great concern with the number of terrorist cells that exist in America, not just in some shadowy enclave in Afghanistan or somewhere in the subcontinent, but they've taken root in this country because it's so easy to get here.
Let's talk a little bit more about Osama bin Laden, because as you say, he was associated with the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Why don't we talk about him and what he has done here in the United States, Tom, to give people a little bit of background.
Good morning. On a day that is not such a good day here in Washington, D.C., and indeed in the entirety of the United States of America, we are broadcasting locally now, continuing the report of the terrorist attacks, what are believed to be terrorist attacks, in at least 2 cities in this country right now. There is also a report now that an airliner has crashed in Pennsylvania as well. I'm Jim Vance. I'm with Susan Kidd. And there are a lot of things that folks need to know about what's going on in the local area as well, Susan.
Absolutely. We've been watching this story unfold in New York and here in the Washington area with that plane hitting the Pentagon. But now there are some of the everyday matters of life that need to be taken care of. Schools are being closed. We're told that all universities in the Washington area have canceled classes for the day. But the D.C. school children have not been sent home, but for the moment are being told to stay in school. Prince George's County schools will let out a couple of hours early. Of course, there is heightened security all over the Washington area. Police and fire personnel being called in and told to stand by for very long shifts today.
We can tell you that the museums in the city, in the Smithsonian museums, have been closed. The Kennedy Center has been closed. Transportation officials have just reported that anybody trying to get out of town might do well to take the Southeast-Southwest Expressway, Southeast-Southwest Freeway. We are reading now that they're trying to clear the routes on the 14th Street Bridge. All of this because, of course, government offices in the city have been closed. They have been shut down. And as a consequence, all the employees have been told to go home. It is not in a staggered means, and so therefore, come on, bring it in. So therefore, the roads are just a mess, as you might expect, as people try to get out of Washington and to their homes.
We've got a rush hour in early morning.
Indeed.
Again, we're told it's unprecedented. All the symbols of Washington have been shut down. All of the CIA has been evacuated. The National Security Agency people have been moved. All those folks sent home. Only personnel that are considered essential still working. And, of course, many of those areas have moved. Megan McGrath has been out at the Pentagon for some time this morning. She's with us live to tell us what's happening there now. Megan?
Well, if you take a look behind me, you can see the flames and really the rescue effort that's going on here. They're down there. The emergency crews are down there just basically hosing off the section of the Pentagon that has collapsed, and that's what they have been doing for quite some time now. That will give you an idea of just how tremendous this explosion was. Now, we are hearing from eyewitnesses who were in the area at the time that they saw an aircraft slam into the south side of the Pentagon this morning. There was one eyewitness who said that there were no markings at all on the side of the plane, that And let's take a look at some of the VO from when it just happened. There was a tremendous fireball, and actually you could feel a disturbance in the air. We were actually in the area at the time. We didn't see the impact, or we didn't see any planes in the area. However, what we did see was a huge fireball just rise from the area of the Pentagon, and we felt an actual disturbance in the air. We glanced over. We knew immediately the area where the flames were coming from, and just hightailed it over here. And it was just a tremendous explosion. You can see by taking a look at the Pentagon, the side of it, the tremendous amount of damage that has been done here. Literally a section of the building has collapsed upon itself, and of course that poses a great risk not only to the people who are inside. There has to be just tremendous devastation inside that building, but it has also been complicating the rescue efforts of the emergency personnel on the scene here. Now, when this happened, there were a number of people who came out of the Navy Annex, and some people who were in the area. We talked to one man who actually saw the impact of the plane. Here's what he had to say.
I was just casually looking out the corner, out of the window. In the corner of my eye, I saw what looked to be maybe a 20-passenger corporate jet, no markings on the side, coming in at a shallow angle like it was landing right into the side of the Pentagon. And then a huge fireball, perhaps 5 times the height of the Pentagon. And I was on the 5th floor, so we just automatically just ran to the stairs and went down the fire escape.
You were where? You were inside the Pentagon?
No, I was across 395 from the Pentagon in an office tower with, direct view of the Pentagon.
And kind of describe the trajectory. The plane was aimed straight at the building?
It was aimed straight at the building. There was an angle, perhaps. It looked like it was landing. I couldn't tell if the landing gear was up or down. I don't know if it was taking off or landing, but it flew right into the side of the Pentagon, and almost immediately a huge fireball.
And they were using helicopters here in the initial rescue effort on the scene. We saw Julie Carey, one of my colleagues, actually saw some people being transported out by helicopter. And we can only imagine the number of injuries and potential for death in this instance. We are not getting that information from where we stand. We've basically been in this spot all morning long. We are actually right off of Columbia Pike, and you can see the Pentagon off in the distance. There are some PR people here from the Pentagon, but they're not getting a whole lot of information about injuries at all either. The one bit of information, though, that they told us to pass on to people is to stay away from the area. We know that there are a lot of folks who live in the area, who have loved ones who work at the Pentagon. You are not going to be allowed to get anywhere near that building. So really just, I know this is a difficult thing to say because there are a lot of anxious people out there, but really you're not going to be able to get any information by coming here to the Pentagon. The best advice here is to stay put and monitor the news broadcasts, and they will be giving out as much information as soon as they can get it. But if you come down here to the area, you're only going to make things more difficult. They are actually trying to clear people out of this area so that they can continue on with their emergency efforts. And I know that's a large request. There are a lot of very frantic people. They see the video, they see the fire, they see the damage, and of course are thinking the worst when they have a loved one who works inside this building. The damage is tremendous. It is, when you consider just what this building is. This is the Pentagon. This is a secure building. It's a massive building, and you look at the side of it and you see this large section that has been taken out. And again, we are hearing reports that it was an aircraft. We've actually heard from 3 different people who saw an aircraft slam into the side of the building. And then, of course, this big, huge fireball, and the flames just kind of went throughout that entire section. And then I would say it was probably about 40 minutes later when actually that section started to collapse onto itself, and it just couldn't stand the strain and the damage anymore, and it simply collapsed. Now, emergency crews have just been hosing it down all morning long. That's really all we can tell you. I mean, it's certainly an unstable situation down there. They don't want to put their emergency crews in danger or jeopardy, but you know, certainly they want to get in there and they want to get the situation in hand, because we don't know who's inside that building, whether or not there are people trapped. We just don't have that information from here. But by looking at the building, I mean, you can only imagine how difficult a situation it is, and you hope for the best. But certainly they are preparing for the worst and are trying the best that they can to get this situation under control. Again, though,
Megan?
Stay out of the area. Yes.
Megan, we have some information now that people might want to know about what has happened to the casualties at the Pentagon. In fact, we are told that people injured there are arriving now at Virginia Hospital Center, at Inova Alexandria Hospital, and at Inova Fairfax Hospital. Want to know that D.C. police say they are going to respond only to 911 calls, and they ask that anyone who sees anything suspicious should call them at 311. Anyone who sees anything suspicious, the D.C. police want you to call them at 311, but they're only going to respond to 911 calls. Also, we can tell you that Canal Road has been switched to one-way outbound traffic, and you can pretty much assume that almost everything in the area is closed. We'll give you a list of that in a couple of minutes. Right now, Tony Dorsey.
Actually, we have Jonathan Gaffney, who is with the Airport Authority, on the phone with us now. We understand that National Airport will be closed for at least 24 hours. Is that correct, Mr. Gaffney?
Correct, ma'am. Both National and Dulles will be closed for at least 24 hours. We've evacuated all of our buildings and all of our terminals, sent all employees home, and we'll be in that situation until at least 24 hours till we can further assess the entire situation.
Now, we know that air travel has been suspended across the country.
Correct.
Has there been any indication of how long that might last?
Oh, absolutely no idea. Obviously, being a situation that's a couple hours old, tough to say, but in response to all the uncertainty, we decided best for us to go ahead and close 2 facilities until we get a really good idea of what's coming next.
Is there any military presence at the airport, sir?
Nothing I'm aware of, sir. I know all of our public safety have been recalled, and all of our essential employees have been recalled, but I'm not aware of any military folks on board.
Okay.
Mr. Gaffney, we understand that transatlantic flights are being sent to Canada. There are no doubt thousands of people now who have no idea what's going to happen with folks they were expecting to come into this area.
That's a great point.
Is there anywhere where they might get information